Chapter 83. This. Many sect disciples who were preparing to flee were suddenly stunned when they saw this scene. They never dreamed that the hook-nosed man who easily suppressed many upper realm martial artists would be cut in two so easily. That sword light just now. The Lao Dao cultivator of Wudong Mountain had just woken up from his coma when he saw the sword light that destroyed everything. Under that sword light, the void, heaven and earth's essence chi seemed to have been cut off. Everything in the world was overshadowed by that sword light. Even if senior brother personally made a move, it would be impossible for him to make such a move. The Lao Dao cultivator of Wudong Mountain muttered to himself. He looked lost as if he was still immersed in the sword light just now. I survived? Zhang Xiao fell to the ground with a thud, but he didn't feel any pain. Instead, his face was filled with ecstasy. Just now, the hatred of the hook-nosed man towards him was almost overflowing. Zhang Xiao didn't need to think to know that if he really fell into the hands of the other party, he would definitely beg for death. I was almost hit by that sword light just now. Zhang Xiao still had lingering fear. Unlike the others who saw the sword light from a distance, Zhang Xiao, who was caught in the hook-nosed man's hand just now, almost looked directly at the sword light coming towards him. According to the power displayed by the sword light just now, Zhang Xiao almost didn't need to think to know that once he was touched by the sword light, he would be no different from the hook-nosed man. The Manor Lord is dead? The hook-nosed man's men trembled and their faces were full of fear. Although they didn't know what happened to the sword light just now, the hook-nosed man really died in front of them. What should we do now? Several men in black looked at each other and suddenly wanted to retreat. Without the hook-nosed man, their strength was greatly reduced. Not to mention killing this group of sect disciples. If they were not careful, they might even be killed. Let's go. These men in black made a decision almost instantly. If the hook-nosed man was still alive, they naturally wouldn't dare to disobey the orders of a grade 1 great grandmaster. But now that the hook-nosed man's body was cold, if they didn't leave now, when would they? What if that sword light came again? Wouldn't all of them die here? Whoosh! 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 Instantly, these black-clothed men disappeared one after another. At this moment, the disciples on the scene did not pay any attention to these black-clothed men. Their gazes were all fixed on Xian Ku. Xian Ku was also at a loss. He was just waiting for death. With the strength of the hook-nosed man, killing a middle realm cultivator like him would be too easy. The Venerable One gave me a wooden sword? Xian Ku lowered his head and looked at the wooden sword still hanging around his neck. At this moment, the wooden sword had once again returned to its normal state. However, there were a few faintly discernible cracks on the edge of the wooden sword. Just when Xian Ku was in a daze, the other sect disciples walked over cautiously and stopped 10 meters away from Xian Ku. They looked at Xian Ku curiously, as if they wanted to say something but didn't dare to. They are all heaven's chosen of their respective sects. Although they don't know what happened to the sword light just now, they obviously know that it has something to do with Xian Ku. Little Wa. Xian Ku, what happened just now? At this moment, Zhang Xiao, who had almost recovered, walked over and looked at Xian Ku and couldn't help but ask. As soon as these words came out, many sect disciples' eyes lit up and their ears pricked up. They wanted to hear what Xian Ku had to say. What happened? Xian Ku blinked and didn't know what to say. The wooden sword was given to him by the Venerable. That sword light just now could only be left in the wooden sword by the Venerable. Suddenly, a low voice sounded. Zhang Xiao, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. The Lao Dao disciple of Wudong Mountain quickly walked over and glared at Zhang Xiao. Then, under everyone's incredulous gaze, the Lao Dao disciple bowed deeply to Xian Ku. Thank you for your help. We of Wudong Mountain will remember it. If anything happens in the future, we will definitely repay you. The Lao Dao disciple's words came from the bottom of his heart. These words were not said to Xian Ku, but to show goodwill to the existence who had just slashed out the sword light. The Lao Dao disciple was a second-grade supreme power master. In addition, he stayed with Zhenrenzhang of Wudong Mountain all year round. Whether it was eyesight or other things, he was naturally far from a young disciple like Zhang Xiao. Based on the sword light just now, the Lao Dao disciple could conclude that the rumor that the real Arhat had walked out of the Shaolin Temple was probably true. Except for the high and mighty Venerable Arhat, Who could slash out such a powerful sword light? When the elders of the other sects saw this scene, their expressions changed slightly. They immediately bowed deeply to Xianku, or to be precise, to the palm-sized exquisite wooden sword hanging around Xianku's neck. Next, because of the hook-nosed man, many sect disciples were naturally not interested in continuing to travel around the world. Under the urging of their elders, they hurriedly returned. Especially the Lao Dao disciple of Wudong Mountain. At this moment, how could he not know that the hook-nosed man came for Zhang Xiao? As for the disciples of the other sects, they were probably implicated by Wudong Mountain. Wudong Mountain is famous in the world, and Zhang is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster standing at the peak of the world. But now they almost failed. How could the Lao Dao disciple not be angry? Thinking of this, the Lao Dao disciple hurried back to Wudong Mountain with Zhang Xiao to investigate the origin of the hook-nosed man, and why he had a grudge with Wudong Mountain. Shaolin Temple. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Just when the palm-sized exquisite wooden sword hanging around Xianku's neck slashed out, Su Qin suddenly opened his eyes and looked in a certain direction. The sword intent was activated? Su Qin's eyes were thoughtful. In the wooden sword he gave to Xianku, there was a sword intent condensed from the Dharma sword technique. This sword intent was left by Su Qin. Even if it was far away, once it was activated, Su Qin could roughly feel it. Did he encounter a life-and-death crisis? Su Qin's expression remained unchanged, and he thought silently in his heart. Only when Xianku encountered an unstoppable force will the sword intent in the wooden sword be stimulated. The crisis has passed. Su Qin carefully felt for a while and whispered to himself. The sword intent he left in the wooden sword could slash out 3 times. Now that Su Qin felt that the wooden sword was completely immersed after the first slash, he knew that Xianku was almost safe at this moment. Otherwise, the remaining sword intent in the wooden sword would have continued to slash out the remaining 2 slashes instead of being immersed. Chapter 84. However, what on earth could cause a life-and-death crisis for Xianku? Su Qin was slightly curious. Others may not know, but Su Qin, as the venerable arhat, can see everything in the Shaolin Temple with his divine sense. Just when Xianku left the Shaolin Temple and entered the cultivation world, the Dharma Quartz head also disappeared from the Shaolin Temple. Obviously, the Dharma Quartz head was ordered by Abbot Huiwen to secretly follow Xianku to protect him. It should be known that in addition to Abbot Huiwen, a grade 1 great grandmaster, the Shaolin Temple only has 2 grade 2 great grandmasters. To be able to spare one to protect Xianku is already extremely important. In fact, if it weren't for Abbot Huiwen being unable to leave and having to stay in the Shaolin Temple, he would have wanted to protect Xianku, because Xianku is too important to the Shaolin Temple. But even so, with a grade 2 great grandmaster protecting him in the dark, Xianku still stimulated the sword intent in the wooden sword. Because of this, Su Qin was a little interested. However, although Su Qin was a little curious, he didn't care very much. What a pity. Whether it's the sword intent or divine sense, they all come from me. If one day I fall, these sword intent and divine sense will quickly dissipate as if they have no source. Su Qin sighed softly. This is also the reason why the Shaolin Temple has been in decline for thousands of years, and many venerable arhat have come out. Perhaps when arhat was alive, the Shaolin Temple was famous in the world and no one dared to provoke them, but once venerable arhat passed away, everything was different. No matter what happens, my own strength is still the most important thing, Su Qin sighed. If he was strong enough to have an immortal golden body like Buddha, indestructible for all eternity, then what in the world would be able to stop him? Thinking of this, Su Qin once again immersed himself in cultivation. Since entering the 3rd heaven, Su Qin's cultivation speed had obviously slowed down a little, but the slow here was equivalent to the 9th level of martial arts. Compared to the venerable arhat of the Shaolin Temple or the martial arts legends of Jianghu, Su Qin's cultivation speed was still so fast that it was shocking. Whoosh! Suck! As Su Qin breathed in and out, the yuan qi of the entire back mountain shook along with his breathing. Time passed slowly. One day later in the Dharma court, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads gathered together again. Huiju sent a letter. Xianku was ambushed by a grade 1 great grandmaster on his journey. Abbot Huiwen looked at the court heads and said in a deep voice, Huiju is the Dharma court head and belongs to the Hui generation of disciples, along with Abbot Huiwen. The Dharma court head secretly followed Xian Ku out of the Shaolin temple. The other disciples may not know, but the court heads present are clear about it. This is also the result of the discussion between the court heads and Abbot Huiwen. Although the Shaolin temple is a great sect and ordinary forces do not dare to provoke the Shaolin temple, but it is better to be safe than sorry. With Xian Ku's potential, coupled with Su Qin's guidance, he may not be able to achieve the Venerable Arhat, but he can at least reach the height of the Meng Yuan imperial teacher and Daoist Zhang in the future. How could the Shaolin temple not have a backup plan for such a rare genius? However, the court heads had never expected that Xian Ku, who had entered the secular world to cultivate, would still encounter danger despite all their preparations. Grade 1 Great Grandmaster? Which Grade 1 Great Grandmaster dared to kill the Shaolin Temple's son of Buddha? The warrior monastery head was furious and stood up abruptly. The other court heads also had ugly expressions. In their view, in the face of a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster's attack, Xian Ku should not have survived. After all, no matter how great one's potential is, it still takes time to accumulate. Don't worry, Xian Ku is fine. Abbot Huiwen glanced around and said. Fine. The court heads' eyes widened in disbelief. They couldn't figure out how Xian Ku, with his strength in the middle realm, managed to save his life from a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. Before the Venerable left, he gave Xian Ku a wooden sword. It was this wooden sword that released a shocking sword intent and killed the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. A smile appeared on Abbot Huiwen's face. Wooden sword. Killed a Great Grandmaster? The court heads looked at each other. The shock in their hearts could be imagined. They were very clear about Su Qin's strength. Not to mention a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, even a Grade 1 Great Perfection would be vulnerable in front of the Venerable. But what the court heads did not expect was that Su Qin only relied on a wooden sword to kill a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster from an unknown distance. Is he still human? Although the Venerable Arhat is invincible, a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster is not an ant. The Venerable is the reincarnation of Buddha. How can we peek into his methods? After a long while, the head of the disciplinary hall murmured in a low voice. His eyes filled with awe. It's time to sign in. Su Qin leisurely came to the scripture pavilion, his thoughts fluctuating. During this time, in order to make up for the consumption of the glazed golden core, Su Qin has been signing in at the Bodhi court and has not come to the scripture pavilion for a long time. System sign in. Su Qin said in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtain the array diagram, Essence Gathering Holy Land. Array diagram? Essence Gathering Holy Land. Su Qin's eyes lit up, and he immediately understood what the sign-in thing was. It should be some kind of heaven and earth array. Su Qin thought silently. After entering the martial Tao realm of Venerable Arhat or legend, one can comprehend the heavens and earth and master the power of heaven and earth. Some Venerables Arhat have created some heaven and earth arrays. The effects of these heaven and earth arrays are different. Some are inclined towards concealment, some are inclined towards suppression, and some are inclined towards healing. For example, the demon-subduing tower of the Shaolin Temple and the stone gate of the place where Tuarahan died are all protected by heaven and earth arrays. In the past 20 years, Su Qin has also signed in dozens of heaven and earth array diagrams. Now, this essence gathering holy land must also be some kind of heaven and earth array. Just as Su Qin was thinking, everything about the essence gathering holy land flooded his mind. After a while, Su Qin suddenly opened his eyes. I didn't expect it to be a heaven and earth array that gathers world's essence chi. Su Qin was very satisfied. This was the first time he obtained this kind of heaven and earth array. One must know that martial Tao cultivation, under the upper realm, doesn't rely on world's essence chi. But once one reaches the upper realm, one needs to use world's essence chi to cleanse the body. At this time, the importance of world's essence chi will be revealed. The richer the world's essence chi, the greater the benefits to martial artists. Even if an ordinary person stays in a place with rich world's essence chi for a long time, they will not get sick and their lifespan will be prolonged. Shaolin Temple is a great martial Tao sect in the world, and it has produced Venerable Arhat, so the place where it is located naturally has sufficient world's essence chi. However, this world's essence chi is more than enough for ordinary martial artists, But in the eyes of Venerable Arhat Su Qin, it is not enough. Chapter 85. Outside the scripture pavilion, Su Qin was constantly sensing the essence-gathering Holy Land array. However, if I want to arrange this array, I need 999 jade stones. Su Qin frowned slightly. No matter what kind of heaven and earth array it is, it needs a medium to arrange it, and the essence-gathering Holy Land is no exception. 999 jade stones. Su Qin thought for a while and prepared to let Abbot Huan gather these materials. The Shaolin Temple, as a great sect, has thousands of disciples. It is absolutely easy to find the 999 jade stones that Su Qin needs. Time passed slowly. Su Qin's task immediately attracted the attention of Abbot Huan and the court heads. This is the first time Su Qin has ordered them to do something, so how can Abbot Huan and the others dare to slack off? On this day, Xian Ku finally returned to the Shaolin Temple. Xian Ku's return naturally caused some shock in the Shaolin Temple, including Abbot Huan. After the court heads met Xian Ku, they asked him to come to the Back Mountain Forbidden Area to see Su Qin. In the Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Greetings, Venerable. Xian Ku respectfully said to Su Qin. This time, if it were not for the wooden sword given by the Venerable, Xian Ku would have died in the hands of the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. It can be said that Su Qin not only taught Xian Ku the Tao, but also saved his life. Do you have any doubts? Su Qin just glanced at Xian Ku and said, maybe Abbot Huan and the court heads can't see anything, but Su Qin's divine sense can observe the details. Even if it is not as good as the Buddhist divine sense, it is not something that Xian Ku can hide. Venerable, Xian Ku hesitated for a while, then bowed his head and said, disciple does have doubts. During this time, Xian Ku has seen all kinds of things in the world, and while he was deeply enlightened, the doubts in his heart also became stronger. Tell me about it. Su Qin looked at Xian Ku again and said slowly, yes. Xian Ku took a deep breath, paused and continued, Venerable One. When I entered the world this time, I realized that all living beings are doing it for profit. There are even some who would do anything to achieve their goals, and even commit atrocities. Disciple doesn't know whether this kind of behavior is right or wrong. If it is wrong, why no one can change it? Xian Ku raised his head and looked at Su Qin, his tone full of doubt. Right or wrong? A smile appeared on Su Qin's face and he said, all kinds of things in the mortal world are mysteries. It is the law of the world. There is no right or wrong, just like wolves eating sheep and sheep eating grass. You are not involved, you are not a wolf and you are not a sheep. The reason why you insist on right or wrong is only because of your mind. Su Qin's words were like a bronze bell. Every word shook Xian Ku. It was like a blow to the head, pulling him out of his doubts. There is no right or wrong. It is just a mind, Xian Ku. His eyes became brighter and brighter, as if he had seen through something, and his whole body suddenly became transparent. Thank you, Venerable One, for pointing this disciple out. Xian Ku once again bowed deeply to Su Qin, and said respectfully, you may leave. Su Qin waved his hand and said, yes. Xian Ku bowed and left. Sigh, at such a young age, why do you have to think about philosophy? Su Qin shook his head. If it was an ordinary person, even those eminent monks, a holy monk, they may be stumped by Xian Ku. Even if they are not, it is impossible to give Xian Ku a clear answer. But who is Su Qin? He has lived 2 lives, and all kinds of ideas about his previous life are deeply engraved in his mind. How can he be stumped by Xian Ku? However, after this, there is no more karma in his heart, and he is expected to enter the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster realm before the age of 40. Su Qin thought and judged in his heart. A 40-year-old Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, although far from being comparable to Su Qin, but looking at the whole world, he is still a top genius. In the future, if he has enough opportunities, he can even touch the bottleneck of Arhat. Of course, even if everything goes well, it will take 100 or 200 years for Xian Ku to get close to the bottleneck of Arhat. And with Su Qin's current cultivation speed, in 100 or 200 years, even if he does not completely transcend the Arhat level, he will at least reach the invincible 9th heavenly layer of Arhat realm. I hope you can grow as much as possible before the scripture pavilion and the Bodhi court are exhausted. Su Qin thought silently. Little sister should be doing well in Chang, and right? Su Qin raised his head slightly, looking in the direction of Chang and city, and suddenly thought. Since entering the Arhat realm, Su Qin quietly returned to Zhangzhou's Yin city once. However, when Su Qin arrived there, he learned that his family Su had moved to Chang'an. After Su Qin learned about this, he did not worry too much about the safety of his family Su. Chang'an city is under the control of the Emperor of Tang. With Prince Li Shang, how could his family Su be in trouble? Besides, Li Shang has now been conferred the title of Crown Prince by the Emperor of Tang. As long as the Emperor of Tang is alive, his family Su will be safe. In addition, his little sister is wearing the jade pendant Su Qin gave her, which contains a strand of Su Qin's divine sense. Through this strand of divine sense, even if Su Qin can't know what she has experienced, he can roughly judge his little sister's state. Divine sense is different from sword intent and saber intent. Whether it's sword intent or saber intent, they are but a strand of Su Qin's power. But divine sense is a strand of essence that Su Qin has separated from himself. To put it simply, if the sword intent in the wooden sword Su Qin gave to Xian Ku were to erupt, Su Qin could only be sure that the sword intent had erupted. However, Su Qin did not know why the sword intent had erupted, or what kind of enemy Xian Ku was facing. But divine sense is different. If the divine sense in Su Yuan's jade pendant were to erupt, even if Su Qin is far away, he can roughly sense the situation on Su Yuan's side. Over the years, through his connection with the jade pendant, Su Qin is very sure that Su Yuan is very safe both physically and mentally. I still have to cultivate. Outside the continent, in the depths of the endless ocean, there are still unknown martial arts legends. Even though my current strength has reached the third heaven, and I can dominate this continent, I am still not invincible in the entire world. There are still experts of the same level. Su Qin calmed down, swallowed a glazed golden elixir, slowly closed his eyes, and immersed himself in cultivation. At the same time, in Chang'an City, in a luxurious palace, song and dance celebrated the peace and harmony, and the guqin played. At the head of the palace sat a man in a brocade robe. At this moment the man looked gloomy, obviously suppressing some kind of anger. A moment later, what does father mean? He actually made that bastard the crown prince. The luxurious man slammed his hand on the table, his anger soaring to the heavens. Chapter 86. As soon as the brocade-robed man finished speaking, all the singers who were performing and dancing knelt on the ground in fear, not daring to raise their heads. Prince Chan, be careful with your words. A middle-aged man who looked like a strategist hurried over and whispered. His Majesty personally issued an imperial edict to confer the title of Crown Prince, and then he sent eunuch Zhao to bring Prince Shang to the East Palace. His Majesty is determined. The strategist quickly said. If Prince Chen's words reach His Majesty's ears, and eunuch Zhao's ears, as soon as he said this, the brocade-robed man's face changed. He looked at the singers who knelt on the ground and dared not raise their heads, and his expression gradually calmed down and said, Men, drag them away. Yes. Suddenly, dozens of soldiers in black armor walked out from the dark and dragged the terrified singers away. Then what should I do now? Watch that bastard sit on the throne? Prince Chan clenched his fists, his face full of unwillingness. Over the years, as the Emperor of Tang grew older and older, the conflict between him and the other princes grew bigger and bigger. But even so, Prince Chan was still willing to accept it, because he knew that he had hoped to sit on the throne. But now, with the Emperor of Tang's conferment, the Crown Prince had a master. How laughable was the competition between the princes! If it was another prince who was conferred the title of Crown Prince, even if Prince Chan was unwilling, he would not be filled with resentment like now. But Li Shang, in Prince Chen's view, Li Shang was just a bastard who jumped out from a corner. It was already a great blessing to enjoy the treatment of an imperial heir. And now he dared to touch the throne? Prince Chan, don't panic. The middle-aged man who looked like a strategist looked around and said in a low voice, It's still too early to talk about the throne. Oh? Prince Chen's eyes lit up, and he stared at the strategist. What do you think? Prince Chan. His Majesty is old. Even with eunuch Zhao's protection, there are many things that cannot happen according to his wishes. The middle-aged man who looked like a strategist said meaningfully. Hearing this, Royal Highness Chun narrowed his eyes. You're right. Royal Highness Chun looked at his advisor with a smile on his face. Father. He's old. Shaolin Temple. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Su Qin sat cross-legged and looked at the thousands of top-grade jade stones in front of him. These top-grade jade stones were sparkling and translucent, priceless. If they were placed in the outside world, it would cause a commotion. However, at this moment these jades were placed in front of Su Qin like stones. The Shaolin Temple is really efficient. Su Qin was quite satisfied. Yesterday he had instructed Abbot Huiwen to collect jades. Today these jades had appeared here, and the quantity was much more than the 999 jades. Since the jades are all here, let's start setting up the heaven and earth formation. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and everything about the essence gathering Holy Land formation slowly flowed into his mind. Although Su Qin was very familiar with the essence gathering Holy Land formation after the system's infusion, familiarity was familiarity. However, it was his first time setting up a formation, so he still had to be cautious. If something went wrong in the process, these jade stones would be wasted. Time passed. Su Qin embedded each jade stone in a special position in the Back Mountain Forbidden Area, and finally used his divine sense to pry the heaven and earth essence qi in a radius of tens of miles. This was the key to the heaven and earth formation. Whether it was the jades or other mediums, they were all just supplementary materials. The true determinant of whether the formation could be formed was whether the person setting up the formation had sufficient divine sense. Generally speaking, only Venerable Arhat or martial arts legend-level divine sense could pry the heaven and earth essence qi. Wang. As Su Qin's divine sense continued to guide, the jades embedded in the Back Mountain Forbidden Area bloomed with a misty light. Then, endless heaven and earth essence qi rushed in from all directions. Suddenly, 999 jades bloomed with a misty light again, constantly guiding the heaven and earth essence qi in a radius of tens of miles. Whoosh! Almost at a speed visible to the naked eye, the heaven and earth essence qi in the entire Back Mountain Forbidden Area condensed into a mist, constantly circling the Back Mountain and slowly spreading in all directions. At this moment, all the Shaolin Temple disciples opened their eyes wide and looked at the Back Mountain Forbidden Area subconsciously. Look, there seems to be a mist in the Back Mountain, a Shaolin Temple disciple exclaimed and said loudly. Over the years, although there had been strange noises in the Back Mountain Forbidden Area, most of them were the gathering of heaven and earth essence qi and would soon disappear. But now there was a mist that lingered for a long time like a fairyland. This was the first time they had seen it. What happened? Why is there a mist in the Back Mountain? A disciple subconsciously approached the Back Mountain Forbidden Area and asked curiously. Wait, is there something wrong with this mist? A Shaolin Temple disciple subconsciously took a breath of the faint mist, and his face changed slightly. The mist he inhaled was only a trace of the infinitely diluted mist that floated out of the Back Mountain Forbidden Area. But even so, the Shaolin Temple disciple felt an icy cold aura permeating his body, which was very comfortable. Feel it too. This mist is good stuff. I feel that the injuries I suffered from cultivation are getting better. Could it be that this fog is really immortal qi? Many Shaolin Temple disciples were in disbelief and were discussing. At this moment, compared to the disciples' disbelief, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were even more shocked to the extreme. This mist. Is it condensed from heaven and earth essence qi? The warrior monastery head was stunned and said with a trembling voice. They were at least martial artists in the upper realm. After experiencing the cleansing of heaven and earth essence qi, they naturally knew the benefits of heaven and earth essence qi to martial artists. The other court heads glanced at each other, and their faces were also full of shock. Why don't we go see the Venerable and ask what's going on? After a while, the disciplinary court head couldn't help but say. At this moment, the movement of the mist in the Back Mountain was too big. Even if they knew that Su Qin didn't want to be disturbed, they had to bite the bullet and go up. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Su Qin sat cross-legged. If the essence qi outside the Back Mountain was only condensed into mist, then here the mist was about to form a substance. In such an environment, Su Qin only felt that the true essence in his body was running a lot faster. No wonder many Venerable Arhat and legends like to comprehend these heaven and earth great arrays. It turns out that there are such great benefits, Su Qin only felt that every piece of flesh in his body was cheering. Suddenly, at this moment, Su Qin's eyes moved and looked outside the back mountain forbidden area. They're here too? Su Qin's divine sense shrouded the area and naturally found Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads standing outside the back mountain forbidden area hesitantly, not knowing whether to come in or not. Come in. Just as Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads looked at each other and stopped outside the back mountain forbidden area, a calm voice sounded in their ears. The Venerable has agreed to let us in. The warrior monastery's court head looked happy and carefully walked into the back mountain forbidden area. Abbot Huiyuan and the other court heads followed closely behind. And as they continued to walk in, Abbot Huiyuan and the others increasingly felt the extremely rich essence qi of heaven and earth. Finally, they walked into the depths of Buddha Mountain in the back mountain forbidden area and saw Su Qin sitting cross-legged, surrounded by white mist. As he breathed, it was long and profound, almost like a Buddha. Greetings, Venerable One. Abbot Huiyuan and the others bowed. Chapter 87. Get up. With Su Qin's words, Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads dared to straighten their backs a little, but even so, they still lowered their heads and did not dare to look directly at Su Qin. Venerable, I wonder about the mist in this back mountain. Abbot Huiyuan carefully organized his words and asked tentatively. In Abbot Huiyuan's heart, the young monk sitting cross-legged in front of him was no longer a disciple of the Shaolin Temple, but the Venerable Arhat, the reincarnation of Buddha, destined to break the limits of the world in the future. Mist? It's just a little thing I made. Su Qin didn't care. The mist in Abbot Huiyuan's eyes was just a vision produced by the condensation of world's essence qi. It was not the same as the real mist at all. Little thing. The court heads looked at each other and felt as if they were dreaming. They had just quietly inhaled the mist outside the back mountain, so they could clearly perceive that the mist helped them. Especially the court head of Arhat. He spent most of his energy on external cultivation when he was young, which led to some internal injuries in his body. These internal injuries accumulated. Maybe nothing would happen now, but when the court head of Arhat's qi and blood really declined, it would really break out. The court head of Arhat also had a headache about this, but there was nothing he could do. These internal injuries were deep in the bone marrow. Unless he stepped into grade 1 and completed the transformation of his body, it would be difficult to get rid of them. But now, after inhaling a few breaths of the mist, the court head of Arhat felt that these internal injuries in his body were slowly getting better. Although there was still a long way to go before he fully recovered, at least it would not continue to deteriorate. However, for him, the mist was comparable to an elixir, but in Su Qin's mouth it was just a little thing not worth mentioning. This made the court heads feel very emotional, and for a while, they didn't know what to say. They were all martial artists in the upper realm, and they were exposed to world's essence qi every day. Of course, they recognized that the mist was condensed from world's essence qi. However, even though he recognized it, when he actually saw it and even absorbed it into his body, he still felt incredulous. Since you're here, I have something to say. Su Qin glanced at Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads and said lightly, every day, some of the fog will spread to the outside of the back mountain. You can choose some disciples to absorb it. Once the heaven and earth elemental formation of the elemental gathering Holy Land was set up, it would attract the heaven and earth elemental qi within a radius of tens of miles at all times. The qi of heaven and earth was compressed by the heaven-earth formation and became solid, but there was still a small part of it that leaked out of the formation. That was the fog that the disciples of the Shaolin Temple saw. Compared to the true yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered by the essence gathering Pure Land, the mist was far inferior. It was on a completely different level. But for the Shaolin Temple's middle realm disciples and even the upper realm court heads, it had a great effect, nourishing the body, improving cultivation, and so on. Su Qin reminded Abbot Huiyuan and the others of this matter based on the principle of not wasting anything. Anyway, Su Qin didn't care about the mist. Even if he didn't say it, the mist would naturally dissipate into heaven and earth. Instead of that, it was better to help the disciples of the Shaolin Temple. However, what Su Qin didn't expect was what kind of monstrous waves his words set off in the hearts of Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads. One must know that the mist was not like some pills that would disappear after eating it. According to their guess, the mist should be able to be produced continuously. After absorbing it today, it will still appear tomorrow. What does this mean? This means that this is an inexhaustible treasure. Thank you, Venerable. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads bowed deeply to Su Qin. At this moment, there was nothing but gratitude in their hearts. Go out. Su Qin opened his mouth and said. Now that the elemental gathering Holy Land formation had just been completed, before he had the time to settle down and experience it, Abbot Huiwen and the others came to find him. Now that he had explained everything, Su Qin naturally asked them to leave. Yes. Abbot Huiwen and the others respectfully left. What a pity. This kind of formation that gathers the qi of heaven and earth involves the operation of the qi of heaven and earth. Every once in a while I have to personally maintain it. Otherwise, after 20 years at most, the effectiveness of the formation will continue to decline. After 100 years, it will completely become a useless formation. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. The heaven and earth formation that gathers the qi of heaven and earth was not the same as the heaven and earth formation that conceals or suppresses. The latter only needs to cover a very small area. In this small area, the fluctuations of heaven and earth are small and do not need to be constantly adjusted, so it can exist for a long time. Especially the concealment type heaven and earth formation, which can be maintained for almost 1,000 years. For example, the secret chamber where Tuarahan passed away was not discovered by Su Qin until 900 years later, and the formation can still avoid the detection of Su Qin's divine thought after 900 years. But the elemental gathering Holy Land formation is different. It involves the qi of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. Such a large area of qi of heaven and earth will change almost immediately, and once the qi of heaven and earth changes, the elemental gathering Holy Land formation will naturally change accordingly, otherwise it will gradually lose its effectiveness. While thinking, Su Qin closed his eyes and immersed himself in cultivation. At this moment, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads walked out of the back mountain forbidden area. Abbot Huiwen stopped and looked back at the slowly spreading fog. Even if this fog can only last for 50 years, it can ensure the prosperity of the Shaolin Temple for 300 years. Abbot Huiwen sighed and said softly, 50 years? 300 years of prosperity. The other court heads were shocked and looked at Abbot Huiwen in disbelief. They had overestimated the influence of the fog on the Shaolin Temple, but from Abbot Huiwen's words, it seems that the importance of the fog is far beyond their imagination. You don't believe me? Abbot Huiwen glanced at the court heads, shook his head and continued, I have just estimated that if we cultivate under this fog in 10 years, the number of martial artists in the upper realm will double, and in 20 years at least 2 grade 1 great grandmasters will be born. In 50 years, the number of great grandmasters in our temple will reach 8 to 10. With so many great grandmasters, the number of powerhouses born in our temple will only increase. If this continues, I am afraid that 300 years of prosperity will not be enough. Abbot Huiwen said slowly. The other court heads were already dumbfounded by what they heard. Especially when they heard that in 50 years, the number of grade 1 great grandmasters in the Shaolin Temple will reach 8 to 10. This is a grade 1 great grandmaster. In today's world, I am afraid that only the various countries have such a number of great grandmasters, right? To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Studies. Chapter 88. When Abbot Huiwen talked about the influence of the fog in the back mountain, the court heads were shocked. They instinctively questioned Abbot Huiwen in their hearts, but on second thought, it seems that Abbot Huiwen's words are very reasonable. With the fog in the back mountain 50 years later, as long as there are no major changes, the Shaolin Temple is very likely to produce 8 to 10 grade 1 great grandmasters. Hurry back and arrange for the disciples to absorb the fog. Otherwise, today's fog may dissipate. The Dharma court head glanced at the court heads who were still in shock and said. When these words came out, the court heads woke up from their daze. Not only do the disciples need to absorb the fog, but they also need the fog to nourish themselves. Especially the court heads of the Arhat court and the warrior monastery, who were originally at peak grade 3, and now with the help of the fog, they can step into grade 2 in one go. Thinking of this, everyone became excited. Back mountain forbidden area. Half a day later, Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the endless yuan qi mist poured into his body like a dragon. Hula! Hula. Every time Su Qin breathed, it was like a certain mythical beast was breathing. The endless yuan qi mist faintly formed a vortex and was absorbed by him. The effect is good. At this time, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, looking satisfied. At this moment, the world's essence qi around him is almost 100 times more than the world's essence qi in other places. Su Qin can greatly improve his cultivation speed here. Coupled with the endless supply of glazed golden cores, to some extent, Su Qin's strength is improving every moment. However, it is more difficult than I thought to break through from the 3rd heavenly layer to the 4th heavenly layer. Su Qin frowned slightly. Even in this cultivation environment, Su Qin still couldn't see where the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer was, as if there was no upper limit to this realm. I'm still too weak. If I were Arhat of the 9th heaven, I would be able to cover an area of 1,000 miles or even 10,000 miles with my enormous divine sense. Then the elemental energy of the world within a radius of 5,000 kilometers will be gathered here. That will most likely truly be comparable to an immortal's abode. Su Qin sighed. The essence-gathering Holy Land formation was also divided into different levels. As for the lowest level ones, they could cover an area of several miles. Next, it would cover a radius of tens of miles, then hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, and tens of thousands of miles. If a venerable who had just entered the realm of Arhat came here, he would only be able to gather the natural energies within a radius of a few miles. However, at this moment, Su Qin had already reached the 3rd layer of the heavenly layer, and his spiritual sense was far superior to that of Arhat, who was at the 1st layer of the heavenly layer. Therefore, the essence-gathering Holy Land that he set up naturally reached the 2nd level, covering an area of dozens of miles. It's a pity that the essence-gathering Holy Lands can't be stacked on top of each other. Otherwise, I would like to set up a few more. Su Qin shook his head. But it can be done now. At least my cultivation speed is definitely much faster than that of the previous venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple. In fact, since ancient times, I'm afraid that no martial arts legend has ever had the same conditions as me. Su Qin nodded slightly. He wasn't dissatisfied. It should be known that throughout history, perhaps some martial arts legends had obtained a large formation similar to the pure land of essence gathering, that could gather the qi of heaven and earth. However, it was unlikely that any of them would be willing to continuously consume a precious elixir like the glazed golden pill. Not to mention that Su Qin also had the Sutra of the Past Amitabha, a supreme scripture that could almost endlessly refine the natural energies. Let's cultivate, don't bite off more than you can chew. Su Qin closed his eyes again and circulated the Sutra of the Past Amitabha in his body. Late at night, the full moon hung high in the sky. Su Qin stopped cultivating. Time to sign in. Su Qin walked out of the back mountain and came to the Sutra Pavilion. System sign in. Su Qin said in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the Pearl Demon Subduing Supreme Divine Art. Prompt: the Taoist connotation here is about to run out, and it will become a non-repeatable sign in place. 2 consecutive cold, mechanical sounds sounded in Su Qin's ears. Pearl Demon Subduing Supreme Divine Art? A non-repeatable sign in place? Su Qin raised his head and looked at the scripture pavilion, his thoughts inexplicably complicated. Since Su Qin entered the Shaolin Temple for nearly 30 years, he had signed in front of the Sutra Pavilion countless times. But now, the Sutra Pavilion that had accompanied Su Qin for many years was finally exhausted by Su Qin. The Taoist connotation was exhausted, and he could no longer sign in. Although the exhaustion of the Taoist connotation of the demon-subduing tower had already reminded Su Qin that even an ancient temple like the Shaolin Temple that had been passed down for thousands of years didn't have endless Taoist connotation. But when this day really came, Su Qin was still filled with emotions. The Taoist connotation of the Sutra Pavilion is gone, and the Bodhi Court is probably going to be gone soon. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. Although the Bodhi Court was an important place of the Shaolin Temple, in terms of Taoist connotation, it shouldn't have much more than the Sutra Pavilion. In addition, Su Qin wouldn't sign in the Sutra Pavilion in the future. All the sign-in opportunities would probably be used in the Bodhi Court. No matter how much Taoist connotation there was in the Bodhi Court, it couldn't withstand Su Qin coming once a day. When I can't sign in the Bodhi Court anymore, it's time to go out. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Although he had stayed in the Shaolin Temple for almost 30 years, he didn't feel any burden about leaving. The main reason was that Su Qin thought that he had left enough for the Shaolin Temple. Not only did he help Xian Ku complete the Buddha's heart, but he also often gave him pointers, saving him from many detours. It was equivalent to cultivating a future Grade 1 great perfection for the Shaolin Temple. In addition, Su Qin also left the essence-gathering Holy Land array in the back mountain forbidden area. This kind of array that gathers world's essence qi, even without Su Qin's maintenance, can last for 20 years. After 20 years it will decline, and it won't be completely destroyed until 100 years later. This doesn't include Su Qin's many times secretly helping the Shaolin Temple solve countless life and death crises. The grievances have been settled. The karma has been settled. Just as Su Qin was thinking, bits and pieces of information about the Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art poured into Su Qin's mind. After a while, Su Qin opened his eyes. Not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly. The Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art is a pure offensive divine art. It can condense 24 pearls with one's own true essence to suppress all demons and monsters. More than 1,000 years ago, a certain Shaolin Venerable Arhat once used this divine art to kill a certain demon path legend. Although it is said that a legend is often not seen in several eras, whether it is a legend or Venerable Arhat, they both have a Shoyuan of 500 years, which is far longer than an era. Therefore, if one is lucky enough, one can often see several legends coexisting in the same era. Of course, if one is unlucky, it may be impossible for a legend to be born in several eras. Condense. Su Qin raised his right hand and condensed a pearl according to the operation method of the Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art. This pearl spun in a circle, faintly revealing a palpitating aura. It's time to go back. Su Qin carefully sensed it and was quite satisfied. In terms of power, this divine art is probably in the top 200 divine arts that Su Qin has obtained in so many years. It is rare. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Love Literature Learning. Chapter 89. Soon, Su Qin returned to the back mountain forbidden area. Although the Descending Demon Pearl Supreme Divine Art is a good divine art, Su Qin did not spend much effort on it. After all, Su Qin knows that no matter what divine art it is, it depends on one's own cultivation. Time passed slowly. Su Qin once again returned to his peaceful days. Sign in cultivation heaven and earth and occasionally giving pointers to Xian Ku. Of course, Su Qin only gave a little pointers to Xian Ku, and did not choose the path for Xian Ku to walk in the future. In martial Dao cultivation, especially when one reaches the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster realm, those who are similar will live and those who are similar will die. Every Grade 1 Great Grandmaster can only achieve their own transformation and become a peak Grade 1 if they walk their own path. Xian Ku has a Buddha's heart and is born intelligent. Even a Grade 1 Great Perfection martial artist cannot affect him. But Su Qin is different. As a Venerable Arhat at the third heavenly layer, his every move will have an indelible impact on Xian Ku. Perhaps these influences are good for Xian Ku, but they may also be bad. Therefore, Su Qin simply let it go, and only give a few pointers when Xian Ku has doubts. Everything else is left to develop. Just when Su Qin was immersed in cultivation again, many disciples of the Shaolin Temple have also undergone significant changes. The back mountain is filled with fog, and every disciple who has been in the temple for more than 10 years can cultivate near the back mountain. Under the fog, even the martial artists in the middle realm and lower realm, who have not been exposed to the world's essence qi, can feel their body being nourished and gradually becoming stronger. On this day, patrolling monk Zhanji had just returned from cultivation near the back mountain, when he saw several other disciples whispering about something. "What are you talking about?" Zhanji walked over and asked casually. At this moment, Zhanji was still amazed by the effect of the fog in the back mountain. As a disciple of the Zhan generation, Zhanji had been in the temple for decades. Naturally, he was qualified to practice in the forbidden area of the back mountain. First, Zhanji didn't think much of it. He thought that the fog was useless. But with this period of cultivation, Zhanji could clearly feel the changes in his body. Zhanji could even faintly feel that his body's blood vitality had become vigorous once more. How unbelievable was this? One had to know that a martial artist's vitality would gradually increase from birth until it reached a peak, and then fell back down. Perhaps it was because he practiced martial arts that his peak was extended for a period of time. However, if there were no other major breakthroughs, the decline of a martial artist's qi and blood would be irreversible after a period of peak. Originally, Zhang Ji was in such a situation. His qi and blood had already begun to decline. If there were no accidents, his strength would not improve at all in the future, and his achievements in this life would stop here. But now Zhang Ji actually felt that his qi and blood were slightly flourishing. That mist, in Zhang Ji's mind, the fog that covered the sky and covered the earth appeared again. While Zhang Ji was deep in thought, the disciples who were whispering to each other quickly looked up at Zhang Ji and said, Brother Zhang Ji, we are talking about the Venerable in the back mountain. A disciple looked around, lowered his voice, and said in a respectful tone, The Venerable? Zhang Ji frowned and looked at the disciples. Is the Venerable someone you can talk about? Brother Zhang Ji, we definitely don't mean to disrespect the Venerable. We are just curious about what kind of person the Venerable is. The disciple who spoke at the beginning quickly replied, for fear that Zhang Ji would think that he disrespected the Venerable. I don't think you dare. Zhang Ji glanced at the disciples and shook his head. You don't have to think about what kind of person the Venerable is. Just remember that the height of the Venerable is no longer something that mortals like us can understand. At the same time, on Wudong Mountain, many Wudong Mountain disciples were gathered in front of an ancient hall. Many disciples had already gone down the mountain to travel the world, and some were even thousands of miles away from Wudong Mountain. But at this moment, these disciples were all standing here as if waiting for something. Is Master coming out of seclusion? A Wudong Mountain disciple's voice trembled as he looked at the ancient hall in the distance and whispered. That's what Martial Uncle said. Zhang Xiao also stood next to him and replied in a low voice, Why did Master come out of seclusion? The second Wudong Mountain disciple looked at Zhang Xiao and asked solemnly, Daoist Zhang could suppress the world for decades without leaving Wudong Mountain. This disciple couldn't understand why Daoist Zhang would announce his exit at this time. Zhang Xiao thought for a while and tentatively said, Some time ago, I went down the mountain to travel the world, but I met an enemy of Wudong Mountain. This enemy was a grade 1 great grandmaster and wanted to kill me. Zhang Xiao paused and continued, Maybe Master knows about this and wants to come out of seclusion to avenge me? Impossible. The Wudong Mountain disciple who just spoke shook his head and said, Master is in seclusion to break through the Supreme Tao. Ordinary things can't disturb Master. If you die, Master may come out of seclusion to avenge you, but since you are not dead, there is still room for redemption. Master will at most order us to go down the mountain to find out the truth. It is impossible for him to come out personally. When these words came out, the other Wudong Mountain disciples immediately nodded. Although Daoist Zhang is protective, nothing happened to Zhang Xiao. In this case, Daoist Zhang will definitely not come out of seclusion for this matter. While many Wudong Mountain disciples were waiting, click, the door of the ancient hall was quietly pushed open. A man in a Taoist robe with simple facial features slowly walked out. His skin was like jade, his eyes were clear, and his age could not be seen. His movements were meticulous, as if he had a strange charm. As soon as the Taoist priest came out, many Wudong Mountain disciples bowed and shouted, Welcome back, Master. Welcome, Ancestor. Their voices shook the sky and spread for several miles. After a while, Daoist Zhang looked around and said, Get up. This Daoist Zhang, who is known to suppress the world, did not have a trace of a martial artist's aura, as if he was an ordinary person. Master, did you make a breakthrough? A Wudong Mountain disciple couldn't help but ask. When the other disciples heard this, their expressions changed and they stared at Daoist Zhang closely. If Daoist Zhang really took the step in the legend, then Wudong Mountain would continue to suppress the world for 300 years. Breakthrough. Daoist Zhang smiled and shook his head. How difficult is the mythical road? Even if I cultivate in seclusion for another 100 years, I won't be able to break through. Then why did Master come out of seclusion this time? The disciple who spoke at the beginning asked carefully. Go down the mountain. Daoist Zhang raised his head and looked in the direction of the Shaolin Temple. He said softly, seeking Tao. To read the unmodified content, Please go to Vinegar Literature Learning. Chapter 90. Down the Mountain. Seeking the Tao. Taoist Zhang's tone was flat, but when he said the word seeking the Tao, there was a hint of expectation. Seeking the Tao? Many Wudong Mountain disciples looked at each other, not knowing what he meant. In their eyes, Taoist Zhang is the Tao of the world. Why would they need to go down the mountain to seek the Tao? Only Zhang Xiao and the other disciples' expressions changed slightly, as if they thought of something. If there is a rumor that the Shaolin Temple has venerable arhat, in the eyes of most martial artists, it is doubtful. But after experiencing the scene of going down the mountain, Zhang Xiao and the other disciples knew that the Shaolin Temple does have venerable arhat. If it is not venerable arhat, who can kill a grade 1 great grandmaster from thousands of miles away with an ordinary wooden sword? This time, Taoist Zhang came out of seclusion because he heard the news. This time if I don't return, Wudong Mountain will be closed for 20 years. Taoist Zhang looked into the distance, and under the gaze of many Wudong Mountain disciples, he walked down the mountain step by step. Shaolin Temple. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were overjoyed. In just a few months, among the disciples cultivating near the back mountain, there were 3 who entered the upper realm. How rare is this? Even in a great sect like the Shaolin Temple, upper realm martial artists are enough to serve as court heads. If it was in the past, it would take at least 10 or 20 years for the Shaolin Temple to produce 3 upper realm martial artists. But now it was completed in a few months. How can this not make Abbot Huiwen and the court heads happy? The more martial artists there are in the upper realm, the more likely it is for a grade 2 and grade 1 great grandmaster to appear. Once the number of grade 2 and grade 1 great grandmasters reaches a certain number, it can in turn guide a large number of disciples with potential. This cycle will form, and the Shaolin Temple will become stronger and stronger. Don't get carried away. These 3 upper realm disciples are the accumulation of our temple in the past years. They are all at peak grade 4 and are only 1 step away from the upper realm. Now, with the help of the fog, I was able to make a breakthrough. But it's impossible to give birth to an upper realm expert in such a short time. The head of the Dharma court said slowly. As soon as he said this, the other court heads who were immersed in joy immediately calmed down. Huiju is right. Abbot Huiwen nodded slightly. Although he was just as happy, he had also thought of this point. The reason why the Shaolin Temple was able to produce 3 upper realm experts in just a few months was mainly because of their previous accumulation. If he wanted to continue this smoothly, it would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. Abbot, I should be breaking through soon. At this moment, the warrior monastery's head couldn't help but ask. You want to break through? Abbot Huiwen looked at the head of the warrior monastery in surprise. One must know that the head of the warrior monastery is a grade 3 martial artist. If he breaks through, he will enter grade 2. Today, in addition to Su Qin, the Shaolin Temple only has 1 grade 1 martial artist, Abbot Huiwen, and 2 grade 2 martial artists, including the head of the Dharma court. Now, if there is 1 more grade 2 martial artist in the warrior monastery, the foundation of the Shaolin Temple will naturally increase greatly. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were rejoicing, a disciple of the Shaolin Temple hurried in. Abbot, court head, someone is asking for an audience. The disciple of the Shaolin Temple panted. Asking for an audience? Abbot Huiwen frowned slightly. Who is it? He said he is from Wudong Mountain, surnamed Zhang. What? The court head's pupils shrank. Wudong Mountain? Surnamed Zhang? No matter how incredible it was, the court heads subconsciously thought of Taoist Zhang on Wudong Mountain. Let's go out and have a look. Abbot Huiwen looked solemn and immediately got up and walked out of the Shaolin Temple. The other court heads looked at each other and immediately followed. Soon, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads arrived outside the Shaolin Temple. At this moment, a man wearing a Taoist robe with simple facial features was standing there quietly. Sure enough, it's Taoist Zhang. The court heads were shocked and still couldn't believe it. They didn't expect that Taoist Zhang of Wudong Mountain was standing outside the Shaolin Temple at this moment. Taoist Zhang. Abbot Huiwen took a breath, stepped forward and asked solemnly. Although he is a grade 1 great grandmaster in front of Taoist Zhang, who has been a peak grade 1 for decades, he is still not enough. Abbot. Taoist Zhang's eyes were calm and gentle, looking at Abbot Huiwen and slightly nodded. I don't know why Taoist Zhang came to the Shaolin Temple? Abbot Huiwen didn't beat around the bush and asked bluntly. When Lao Dao was young, he wandered the Jianghu and was fortunate enough to observe half of the 9 yang divine art of your temple. Taoist Zhang did not answer Abbot Huiwen's question. Instead, he answered his own question. This half of the 9 yang divine art is of great help to Lao Dao. Speaking of this, Taoist Zhang stretched out his right hand and took out a book. Lao Dao has nothing to repay you with, but this Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were stunned. Tai Chi Heart Sutra is the work of Taoist Zhang. Even among the many disciples of Wudong Mountain, only a few have learned the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. But now Taoist Zhang gave the Tai Chi Heart Sutra to the Shaolin Temple? Taoist Zhang, please take it back. Since the 9 yang divine art has leaked to the Jianghu, it has nothing to do with the temple. Thinking quickly, Huiwen rejected the Tai Chi Heart Sutra without hesitation. Although the Tai Chi Heart Sutra is good, it walks the path of Taoism. Even if the Shaolin Temple got it, it would be useless. On the contrary, Taoist Zhang even gave the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Obviously, he was after something big. Taoist Zhang shook his head slightly and did not take back the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Other than that, speaking of this, Taoist Zhang's eyes suddenly lit up. Lao Dao came here to seek an audience with the Venerable One of your temple. Seek an audience with the Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen's face changed. Taoist Zhang, I'm afraid you're late. The Venerable One has already said that he won't see anyone. Abbot Huiwen was silent for a while and said slowly, It's okay. Lao Dao can wait. Taoist Zhang was extremely carefree. Wait. Abbot Huiwen frowned. If Taoist Zhang, the master of Wudong, was still blocking the door, wouldn't it be a great loss of face for the Shaolin Temple? Taoist Zhang, please go back. Abbot Huiwen sighed softly. Since you know that the Venerable One is in charge of our temple, aren't you afraid that the Venerable One will attack you? Abbot Huiwen's words were a warning. Ask in the morning, and you can die in the evening. A smile appeared on Taoist Zhang's face. As long as you let me see the Venerable One, Lao Dao's life is yours. Taoist Zhang's eyes were clear, and his face was serious. This? Abbot Huiwen looked at Taoist Zhang with a solemn expression. In that case, the Shaolin Temple can only ask for advice from Taoist Zhang's Tai Chi path. Abbot Huiwen slowly channeled his inner force and looked directly at Taoist Zhang. Taoist Zhang wanted to see the Venerable One, but with the Venerable One's status, who could see him just because they wanted to? If anyone could see the Venerable One, where would the Venerable One's face be? Where would the Shaolin Temple's face be? With the Venerable One's kindness to the Shaolin Temple, even if Abbot Huiwen knew that he was far from being a match for Taoist Zhang, he would still try his best to stop him. When the other court heads saw this scene, they also channeled their inner force secretly, ready to attack at any time. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were at daggers drawn, a sigh of relief came. A sorrowful sigh could be heard, sounding both benevolent and boundless. Heaven and earth were drawn out and time passed quickly. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were shocked and subconsciously looked in the direction of the back mountain. Taoist Zhang did the same. He raised his head slightly and looked at the back mountain. However, when Taoist Zhang looked, he saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. The back mountain, which was originally calm and serene, suddenly became tall, filling up his entire field of vision. At the highest point of all vision, a figure sitting cross-legged appeared. This figure was like the Buddha in the center of the Pure Land, sacred, compassionate, solemn and pure. Only I was supreme. That is. Taoist Zhang's mind was shaken. He only felt that his vision began to blur, and his thoughts kept falling. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Luan Shui. Chapter 91. The light of Buddha lingered, spreading in all directions. At this moment, Taoist Zhang felt as insignificant as an ant, looking up at an all-powerful Buddha. Supreme, majestic, unrivaled. Plop. Taoist Zhang's thoughts fell into darkness, and he fell to the ground with a plop. Venerable One. Thank you for your help, Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads barely recovered from the shock and bowed deeply in the direction of the mountain. After a while, all the visions gradually dissipated. Venerable One, the strength of the Venerable One is getting more and more unimaginable. Abbot Huiwen sighed and said with emotion, So far, Abbot Huiwen has seen Su Qin make a move twice. The first time was when the Demon Lord attacked the Shaolin Temple, and the second time was when Daoist Zhang asked for an audience. If the first time Su Qin made a move, Abbot Huiwen felt that it was as vast as the heavens and earth, suppressing everything. But now, Abbot Huiwen felt as if it was an endless void, embracing and containing everything. Although the heavens and earth were vast, they were ultimately limited, but the void was endless. Of course, Su Qin had made a move more than twice, such as breaking into the Dharma court to save Abbot Huiwen, and restoring the Buddha's heart for Xian Ku. But in Abbot Huiwen's view, these were not real moves. Yes. The court heads next to him nodded in agreement. The means of the Venerable One were indeed incredible. Ordinary martial artists, even if they were Grade 1 Great Grandmasters, or even peak Grade 1 like Daoist Zhang, could fight against tens of thousands and dominate the world. They could barely accept it. However, Su Qin's Buddhist aura was pervasive and the vision was rampant. This was already the legendary ability of the gods and Buddhas. If it weren't for the Venerable One, we might not be Daoist Zhang's opponent, the warrior monastery's court head whispered. Although the Shaolin Temple's foundation had increased greatly, not only did it have 2 more level 2 martial artists, but it also had a level 1A holy monk like Abbot Huiwen. In addition, there were also thousands of Shaolin Temple disciples. However, if he wanted to rely on these to block Daoist Master Zhang, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. With Zhenren Zhang's strength, once he used his full strength, the destructive power produced by his every move would definitely make people's hearts palpitate. The reason why a peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster can shake the world and surpass Grade 1 Great Grandmasters is because of their absolute strength. Otherwise, why would the Devil Lord dare to attack Shaoshi Mountain and threaten to destroy the Shaolin Temple several years ago? The court heads looked at each other, rejoicing in their hearts. At this moment, the head of the commandment yard seemed to have discovered something and could not help but ask, Abbot, how should we deal with Zhenren Zhang? The head of the commandment yard had just finished speaking. The other court heads and Abbot Huiwen remembered and looked at Daoist Master Zhang who had fallen to the ground. The Dharma court head braced himself and cautiously approached. He glanced at him and said, "He's not dead, he just fainted." The court heads looked at each other and suddenly felt that it was a bit tricky. Since the Venerable has shown mercy, let's send him back to Wudong Mountain. After a long time, Abbot Huiwen slowly said, "Yes, I agree." The other court heads heard this and nodded slightly. In their eyes, if Su Qin had the intention to kill, Daoist Master Zhang would have died long ago. How could he just be in a coma now? Since Daoist Master Zhang is not dead, it means that the Venerable has shown mercy. In this case, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads will naturally follow Su Qin's instructions. Let's do this. I will send Daoist Master Zhang back later. Abbot Huiwen made a decision immediately. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Daoist Master Zhang, Su Qin sat cross-legged, and a trace of emotion flashed in the depths of his eyes. Once upon a time, Daoist Master Zhang was a big shot that he could only look up to. Am I already so strong? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he silently thought in his heart. Daoist Master Zhang, who was once unattainable, couldn't even bear a trace of his aura at this moment. However, in terms of fighting strength, Daoist Master Zhang is stronger than the Demon Lord. Su Qin compared Daoist Master Zhang and the Demon Lord and came to the conclusion that Daoist Master Zhang was better. In fact, whether it is Daoist Master Zhang or the Demon Lord, they are both peak Grade 1 Great Grandmasters who have transformed twice. In any era, they are enough to be called dazzling. But unfortunately, they met Su Qin. However, Daoist Master Zhang's Tao of Tai Chi is a bit interesting. If he has enough opportunities in the future, he may be able to undergo a third transformation and reach Grade 1 Great Perfection, Su Qin speculated in his heart. Su Qin's evaluation of Daoist Master Zhang is already high enough. So far, Su Qin only thinks that Xian Ku is likely to undergo a third transformation and enter the realm of Grade 1 Great Perfection. This is also because Xian Ku has a complete Buddha's heart and often receives guidance from Su Qin, the Venerable Arhat. Daoist Master Zhang can reach this step by himself, which is already a peerless talent. As for whether Daoist Master Zhang can go further, Su Qin can't judge. Every Venerable Arhat or legend has a different way of breaking through, and grasping the qi between heaven and earth is even more impossible to judge. Wudong Mountain. Taoist Master Zhang was not sent by the disciples of the Shaolin Temple. On the way, Taoist Master Zhang had already woken up from a coma. After a short silence, Taoist Master Zhang let the escorting disciples of the Shaolin Temple go back and returned to Wudong Mountain alone. Along the way, Taoist Master Zhang's mind kept flashing the scenes he saw in the Shaolin Temple, especially the last moment of his memory, when he saw the figure of a real Buddha. Soon, Taoist Master Zhang returned to Wudong Mountain. When the disciples of Wudong Mountain saw Taoist Master Zhang, they were overjoyed and surrounded him, looking at Taoist Master Zhang with concern. "Master, are you all right?" A Wudong Mountain disciple couldn't help but ask. It's really that at this moment Taoist Master Zhang's expression was a bit strange. His whole person was in a trance, as if he was still immersed in some kind of emotion. "I'm fine. How could I not be fine?" Taoist Master Zhang shook his head and smiled bitterly. This time when he went down the mountain, nothing happened to him, not even a trace of injury, but only Taoist Master Zhang knew in his heart that he may not be able to get rid of the shadow of that godlike figure in his life. "Master, what did you see in the Shaolin Temple?" Zhang Xiao squeezed in front of Taoist Master Zhang and asked carefully. Before Taoist Master Zhang left, he only said that he wanted to go down the mountain to seek the Tao, which made the disciples of Wudong Mountain puzzled for a long time. But Zhang Xiao guessed that Taoist Master Zhang probably went to the Shaolin Temple to seek an audience with the Venerable. "What did I see in the Shaolin Temple?" Taoist Master Zhang repeated in a low voice, and a trace of ridicule appeared on his face. Lao Dao has always thought that even a real martial arts legend would need a few moves to defeat and kill me. But now, Taoist Master Zhang slowly raised his head and looked deeply in the direction of the Shaolin Temple. "Lao Dao, I was a frog in a well." Chapter 92. Shaolin Temple. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Su Qin sat cross-legged. The entire Back Mountain Forbidden Area was shrouded in white mist. This mist was the real essence gathering Holy Land array. For Su Qin it was nothing, but in the hearts of many disciples of the Shaolin Temple, it was tantamount to a holy land for cultivation. "Finally, I'm close to the peak of the third heavenly layer." Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, and a trace of joy appeared on his face. After this period of day and night cultivation, Su Qin finally reached the peak of the third heavenly layer. It is said that the fourth heavenly layer after the third heavenly layer will have some kind of qualitative change. Su Qin stroked his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. In the 9 grades of martial Tao, every 3 grades is divided into the lower realm, middle realm, and upper realm. This division is not just a division of grades, but also because the martial artists in the upper realm and the martial artists in the middle realm and the martial artists in the lower realm have some kind of change. For example, below the upper realm, martial artists only need to polish their body and internal strength. But if you want to enter the upper realm, you need to let go of the barrier between the body and heaven and earth, and let the heaven and earth's essence qi wash the body. This step is very critical. Who knows how many 4th grade martial artists have fallen because of this? But only in this way can you really enter the upper realm. The same is true for Arhat from the 3rd heavenly layer to the 4th heavenly layer. I thought that it would take at least a few years to enter the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer, but with the heaven and earth array gathering essence qi, as well as the glazed golden core, plus the past Amitabha Sutra refining essence qi, it's actually closed so quickly. Su Qin's thoughts were fluctuating. He had to say that the essence gathering Holy Land array did help Su Qin a lot. At least it shortened his accumulation time. In that case, just directly enter the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer. Su Qin made up his mind. Stepping into the peak of the 3rd heaven was not a breakthrough. As long as Su Qin was cautious, there would not be any danger. In addition, Su Qin had the Millennium Bodhi heart protecting him at all times. Unless Su Qin was courting death, it was impossible for any accident to happen. Just as Su Qin was immersed in cultivation once again. Rumble! The boundless qi of heaven and earth in the entire back mountain began to gather towards him. After all, the origin qi of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles had already been gathered in the back mountain after the origin gathering Holy Land's formation. Time passed slowly. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. In the past few days, Su Qin had been immersed in cultivation except for the daily check-ins where Su Qin would go out. As he continued to inhale and exhale yuan qi, The aura in Su Qin's body became more and more complete, as if it had merged with the surrounding void. Could something have happened to the Venerable One? Xianku stood outside the back mountain and muttered to himself. Usually, Su Qin would occasionally give him some pointers. But during this period, Xianku had not even seen Su Qin's face, let alone give him pointers. Xianku did not care about pointers. What he was worried about was whether something had happened to the Venerable One. Although in Xianku's eyes, Su Qin was no different from a real Buddha. Who would have thought that an accident would happen before it happened? Just as Xianku was hesitating about whether to go in, the entire back mountain forbidden area fell silent. Then, the endless fog shrank and rushed into a certain location in the depths of the back mountain. This is... Xianku was slightly stunned. As the arhat of the Shaolin Temple, he naturally knew that the so-called fog was condensed from the qi of heaven and earth. According to what Xianku knew, ever since the fog appeared outside the back mountain, there had never been a day where it disappeared completely. Could it be that something has really happened to the Venerable One? Xianku's expression changed. At this moment, tap tap tap, a series of light footsteps were heard. Xianku looked up instinctively. He saw Su Qin walking outside step by step. Venerable One. Xianku was overjoyed. He immediately walked to a spot not far away and bowed deeply. Rise. Su Qin did not even look at Xianku as he said lightly. At this moment, the true essence in Su Qin's body was circulating endlessly as if there was no end to it. It kept rising and condensing. I finally reached the peak of level 3. Su Qin sighed softly in his heart and looked down at Xianku. Do you have any doubts about your cultivation recently? Su Qin paused for a moment and continued. In the future, if I'm not in the Shaolin Temple, you have to rely on yourself for everything. As soon as Su Qin said this, Xianku's originally happy expression suddenly froze. Venerable One, are you going to leave the Shaolin Temple? Xianku was silent for a while before he mustered up the courage to ask. Su Qin looked up at the sky and said slowly, of course. Can the Venerable One take me with you? Xianku immediately said eagerly. I can do anything for the Venerable One. If I leave, why would you follow me? Su Qin shook his head and said slowly, I have my path to walk, and you have yours to walk? Besides, it's not like we won't meet again. When you achieve Arhat in the future, you can come to me. A smile appeared on Su Qin's face as he looked at Xianku. If Xianku really has the opportunity and perseverance in the future to get rid of the fate of the previous holders of the Buddha's heart and step into the realm of Arhat, Su Qin doesn't mind accepting him as a disciple. Yes, Venerable One, I will work hard. Xianku clenched his fists and said seriously. Seeing Xianku's expression, Su Qin smiled and took a step forward, disappearing on the spot. When Su Qin appeared again, he was already in front of the Sutra Pavilion. Outside the Sutra Pavilion, many disciples of the Shaolin Temple were constantly entering and exiting, but they all subconsciously ignored Su Qin, as if Su Qin didn't exist at all. Su Qin quietly walked into the Scripture Depository Pavilion. He walked around the first floor and muttered to himself, System sign in. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received 9 revolutions whirling pill *100. Prompt, the Tao accumulation here is about to run out, and it will become a place that cannot be repeatedly signed in. As expected, the Tao accumulation has been exhausted. Su Qin was silent in his heart. In fact, before signing in today, Su Qin vaguely realized that this was probably the last time he would sign in. In the Shaolin Temple, the Tao accumulation of the Sutra Pavilion and the Bodhi Court should not be much different. Now that the Tao accumulation of the Sutra Pavilion has been exhausted, even if the Bodhi Court still has some left, it won't last long. However, the last 109 revolutions whirling pills will definitely be able to compensate for the previous hundreds of sign-in rewards. Su Qin's thoughts turned, and his mind entered the system space. When he saw the extra 109 revolutions whirling pills in the corner, his mood suddenly became better. One must know that even with Su Qin's savings in the past 30 years, he only has about 609 revolutions whirling pills now, and this was saved by him scrimping and saving. Now that there are suddenly 100 more pills, Su Qin is naturally in a good mood. Chapter 93. Not bad, not bad. 109 revolutions whirling pills. Even if I eat one every day, it will be enough for me to use for half a year. Su Qin nodded slightly. The medicinal power of the 9 revolutions whirling pill is even stronger than the glazed golden core. Even the current Su Qin needs 10 days to half a month to digest a complete 9 revolutions whirling pill. If he really takes it, these 109 revolutions whirling pills are enough for Su Qin to use for several years. It seems that in the scripture pavilion, the Bodhi court, and the demon-subduing tower, there is a high chance of getting good things in the last check-in. Su Qin's eyes were thoughtful. For example, the last check-in in the demon-subduing tower allowed Su Qin to obtain the demon-subduing seal, which can restrain all the demon path martial artists in the world. Even an existence like the Devil Buddha will be reduced to ashes under the suppression of the demon-subduing seal. Among them, although the Devil Buddha has been suppressed for more than 900 years and his strength has been greatly reduced, the power of the demon-subduing seal cannot be ignored. There is also the scripture pavilion. Su Qin's last check-in obtained the Pearl Demon Subduing Supreme Divine Art. This divine art is an offensive divine art. It can condense 24 pearls and suppress the enemy. It is enough to rank in the top 200 among the many divine arts obtained by Su Qin. It's time to leave. Su Qin continued to stay in the scripture pavilion for a while, then turned and returned to the back mountain forbidden area. Dharma Court. Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads were discussing Buddhist scriptures and martial arts. This has always been their habit. They will not be complacent. The warrior monastery's court head was even more delighted. Yesterday, he just broke through the bottleneck and officially entered the 2nd grade Grandmaster realm. Now our Shaolin Temple has 3 2nd grade Grandmasters and 1 1st grade Grandmaster. Even among the martial arts sects in the world, we are not weak, the Arhat court head said. Compared to the difficult situation of the Shaolin Temple decades ago, the court heads at this moment felt like they were dreaming. All of this is because of the Venerable. Abbot Huiyuan sighed and said slowly, "Indeed. If it wasn't for the Venerable One, my Shaolin Temple would have been destroyed a long time ago." The other court heads immediately nodded in agreement. Perhaps the disciples who had just entered the Shaolin Temple did not know, but as old people who had lived for decades, of course, they knew how much the Venerable had helped the Shaolin Temple. Just as Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads were about to continue their conversation, a voice suddenly rang out. A calm and leisurely voice suddenly sounded in their ears. "All of you, come to the back of the mountain." Abbot Huiyuan was shocked. "It's the Venerable One. The Venerable asked me to go to the back mountain." The court heads reacted, a trace of doubt flashing across their faces. The Venerable One personally asked them to go to the back of the mountain. This was something that had never happened before in the past. Even if the Venerable One had something to tell them, he would only inform one person. With this thought in mind, even the hot-tempered warrior monastery head realized that something was wrong. "Don't think too much about it. Since the Venerable One asked us to go, let's go." Abbot Huiyuan shook his head, slowly got up, and walked towards the back of the mountain. The other court heads heard this, looked at each other, and also followed behind Abbot Huiyuan. Soon, Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads came to Su Qin. "Greetings, Venerable One." Abbot Huiyuan bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Greetings, Venerable One." The other court heads did the same. "Get up." Su Qin waved his hand and said casually, "I asked you to come this time because I have something to say." Su Qin's eyes were calm, and said lightly, "Today, I will leave the Shaolin Temple and travel the world." As soon as these words came out, Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads' expressions instantly froze. "No need to say anything else, I have decided on this matter." Su Qin looked at them and said, "Yes." Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads said in a low voice with a gloomy look on their faces. The Shaolin Temple had been open for thousands of years, and the previous Venerable Arhat would choose to travel the world for a period of time. Therefore, Abbot Huiyuan and the court heads could not bear to part with him, but they could accept it. After all, for the Venerable Arhat, traveling the world was also a kind of cultivation. If they stopped him, it would be tantamount to destroying the Venerable's cultivation. No one dared to bear such a sin. "After I leave, no one is allowed to come in here." Su Qin paused for a moment, and then continued. He had set up the Pure Land of Energy Gathering formation in the back of the mountain, and did not intend to take it back when he left. After all, Su Qin could set up such a formation as long as there were enough jade stones. As for why Su Qin did not allow others to enter here, it was because the concentration of yuan qi here was too high. If martial artists below the venerable arhat cultivated here, they would probably explode in an instant from the huge amount of yuan qi of heaven and earth. Su Qin didn't want to be surrounded by blood when he came back here again. Yes. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads nodded. The back of the mountain was where the venerable secluded himself. Even if Su Qin did not mention this matter, they would still list this place as a forbidden area. Venerable, when will you come back? At this time, the warrior monastery court head could not help but ask. He asked this question from the bottom of his heart, and there was no utility in it at all. When will you come back? Su Qin smiled and did not reply. For Su Qin, even if he did return to the Shaolin Temple in the future, he would do so quietly and without alerting anyone. Okay, you can all go down. After Su Qin finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes. This time Su Qin asked Abbot Huiwen and the court heads to come over only to inform them. After all, he had also stayed in the Shaolin Temple for nearly 30 years. Even if he really wanted to leave, he would not leave without saying a word. Yes. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads finally bowed deeply to Su Qin before turning and leaving the back of the mountain. What should be left behind has been left behind. What should be done has been done. It's time to leave. Su Qin touched his eyebrows and thought silently in his heart. For the Shaolin Temple, or for any great sect in the world, the most important thing is always the people, not the inherited divine arts and the like. For example, in the Shaolin Temple, even if the scripture pavilion recorded countless divine arts, if it were not for Su Qin, there would not even be a grade 1 great grandmaster in this generation. Half a day later, Su Qin quietly left the Shaolin Temple. Outside the Shaolin Temple, the sky is high and the ground is wide. Su Qin walked hundreds of meters in one step, slowly heading in a certain direction. Ha 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 ha. After being in the cage for a long time, I have returned to nature. Every time Su Qin took a step, a section of thick black hair grew. After just a few steps, his black hair spread over his shoulders. His eyes were bright and his skin was like jade. He did not look like an old-fashioned monk at all. Whether it is venerable arhat or a legend, even a severed limb can be reattached, not to mention growing hair again. Chang'an City is the ancient capital of 10 dynasties. It has a long heritage and has more Dao accumulation than the Shaolin Temple. It should be my next sign-in place. It just so happens that my family Su is there now. Su Qin stopped and thought for a while before rushing towards Chang'an City. Chapter 94. Chang'an City. At this time it was the Shangyuan Festival. Fireworks bloomed, setting off the beauty of Chang'an City. On the stargazing tower, the Emperor of Tang invited the officials to a banquet, drinking wine while admiring the fireworks. The princes were here, and so was Crown Prince Li Shang. The Shangyuan Festival. I don't know if I can see the next Shangyuan Festival. The Emperor of Tang looked up at the sky and muttered to himself, Your Majesty must have a long life. How can you not see the next Shangyuan Festival? The officials hurriedly got up and knelt on the ground, not daring to look up. Haha, the Emperor of Tang glanced at the crowd, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. My officials are right. I'm just lamenting. Yunyang, I feel that father's health has deteriorated again. Crown Prince Li Shang stole a glance at the Emperor of Tang and whispered to Su Yueyun next to him. Su Yueyun heard this, and her pretty face changed slightly. She shook her head and said, You can't say this outside. Crown Prince Li Shang sighed softly. How could he not understand this logic? All the officials said that His Majesty had a long life, but he felt that His Majesty's health had deteriorated. If this was heard by someone and spread, it would have a great impact on his position as the crown prince. However, Li Shang was really concerned about the Emperor of Tang's health. Although Li Shang had only known the Emperor of Tang for a few years, he could feel that the Emperor of Tang was sincere to him. He made him the crown prince because he really wanted to pass the throne to him. The Emperor of Tang treated him like this. How could Li Shang have the heart to publicly lie to the Emperor of Tang? His Majesty sees things much more clearly than you. Su Yueyun hesitated for a moment and then said in a low voice, In court, Who is loyal and who is not loyal, the emperor knows better than you. For now, you just need to take care of your own matters, and do your best to stabilize your position as the crown prince. As for other matters, don't think too much about it because it's useless even if you think about it. Su Yueyun looked around and said quickly in a low voice. Ever since she and Li Shang had entered the Eastern Palace, the Emperor of Tang had often come to visit them. Although Su Yueyun and the Emperor of Tang had not spoken much, she could tell that this old man, who had one foot in the coffin, seemed to have a clear understanding of the situation in the imperial court and could see things more clearly than anyone else. Very soon, the Emperor of Tang seemed to have lost interest and hurriedly ended the banquet. The officials returned to their respective manners. Su Yueyun hesitated for a moment, then lowered his head and said to Li Shang, "My father and mother are waiting for me in the manor. I won't go back to the palace for now." "All right." Crown Prince Li Shang nodded. During the Shangyuan festival, Su Yueyun wanted to go back to the Su mansion to gather with her family for a while. How could he stop him? "I won't go so as not to disturb you," Crown Prince Li Shang said very sensibly. No matter what, he was the crown prince of the imperial court. If he went back to the Su mansion with Su Yueyun, the family Su would not be able to celebrate the Shangyuan festival. After the two parted, Su Yueyun went to the Su mansion. Since Su Yueyun was conferred as the crown princess, the family Su became relatives of the imperial court and was rewarded with a mansion by the Emperor of Tang. This mansion was the current Su mansion. "Father, mother, I'm back." Su Yueyun got out of the jade carriage and walked toward the Su mansion. "Yuna, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you for a long time." The head of the family Su, Su Shimin, came over and said with a smile. Mother Su also stood up with a smile on her face. "Little sister, you're back." The two brothers of the family Su waved at Su Yueyun and greeted her. They quickly sat down and prepared to chat while eating. "Little sister, His Majesty asked you to go to the stargazing tower to enjoy the fireworks. It must be beautiful, right?" The eldest brother of the family Su, Su Sung-ho, said with a face full of envy. The stargazing tower was the tallest building in Chang'an City. It was said that one could see the entire Chang'an City from the top and take in all the beautiful scenery. "Beautiful?" Su Yueyun shook her head. "I think it's the most beautiful to watch the fireworks from here." "All right, Qinghao. It's not easy for your little sister to come back. As her brother, don't always mention these things." Su Shimin glared at Su Sung-ho. "Father, it's okay." Su Yueyun smiled and said, "Oh right, little sister." At this time the second brother of the family Su, Su Changyu, asked curiously, "Do you like that jade pendant?" "I think it's quite ordinary." Su Changyu glanced at the jade pendant hanging on Su Yueyun's waist, his face full of doubts. In his opinion, that jade pendant was extremely ordinary, not even worth 10 coins. Not to mention that Su Yueyun was the crown princess. Even if she was only the daughter of the family Su, there was no way she would treat it as a treasure. "This jade pendant, huh?" Su Yueyun looked down and shook her head. "I don't know why I like it. In short, the first time I saw it I wanted to wear it." Su Yueyun paused and continued, "I feel that as long as I wear this jade pendant, I can always be safe and happy." Su Yueyun's words made Su Qingyu helpless. "Little sister, you've been deceived. There's no jade pendant in this world that can keep people safe and happy." Su Qingyu was about to say a few more words, but when he saw Su Shimin staring at him fiercely, he immediately shrunk his head and didn't dare to continue. The family chatted as they ate. After they finished eating, Su Sung-ho suggested that they go outside and take a look at Chang'an City's market. This suggestion was obviously approved by most people. The family Su group walked out of the Su mansion and came to the market. They admired the fireworks that kept blooming under the night sky, while looking at the street vendors hawking their goods. How great would it be if third brother could be here? Su Yueyun thought of something, and her expression was obviously downcast. The Shangyuan festival was supposed to be a family reunion, and no one could be missing. But now their family Su was obviously missing Su Qin. "I've already persuaded the county governor to ask for him from the Shaolin Temple, but then a certain venerable arhat seemed to have appeared in the Shaolin Temple." Su Shimin sighed softly and said, "Originally, when Su Yueyun became the crown princess, their family Su would be riding on the coattails of the royal family. Su Shimin was planning to get Su Qin out of the Shaolin Temple. At first, he and the county governor had a good discussion. The county governor patted his chest and assured him that everything would be fine. But later, a venerable arhat walked out of the Shaolin temple and killed the devil lord who attacked Shaoshi Mountain. His name shocked the world, and the county governor never mentioned this again. Although Su Shimin was unwilling to accept this, there was nothing he could do, because he was also a martial artist and he knew the meaning of arhat. At this moment, even the emperor of Tang wouldn't dare to order the Shaolin temple, let alone a mere county governor. There will be a way in the future, Su Yueyun forced a smile and said. At this moment, Su Yueyun was walking when she suddenly slipped and lost her balance. Coupled with her low spirits, she forgot to adjust her strength and was about to fall to the ground. Yuner. Su Shimin immediately noticed the abnormality and rushed forward to support Su Yueyun. However, suddenly, a slender figure walked towards them, and actually rushed in front of Su Shimin to support Su Yueyun. Watch where you're going. The slender figure walked with his back to the light. Whether it was Su Yueyun or the rest of family Su, they couldn't see his face clearly. After the slender figure helped Su Yueyun steady, he walked in the opposite direction of family Su. Thank you. Su Yueyun instinctively wanted to thank him, but in the next moment, Su Yueyun was stunned. A sense of closeness that seemed to come from the depths of his blood rushed to his heart. Wait a minute. Su Yueyun suddenly turned around and shouted at the slender figure who was about to leave. Su Shimin and the rest of family Su saw Su Yueyun's reaction, and also looked at the slender figure in confusion. The slender figure paused as if hesitating, but finally slowly turned around. Under the curtain of stars, fireworks bloomed. It was beautiful. The slender figure slowly turned around, facing the starlight, and smiled at Su Yueyun and the rest. Little sister, long time no see. End of Volume 1. Chapter 95. Chang'an City was filled with fireworks. Su Qin stood there with his hands behind his back. His eyes were calm as he looked at Su Yueyun and family Su with a smile on his face. Su Qin's main purpose in coming to Chang'an City was to find a new sign in place, and to meet family Su. You are. Su Yueyun's eyes widened when he saw Su Qin. He felt that the man in front of him was very familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was. When Su Qin entered the Shaolin temple, Su Yueyun was only 3 years old. Almost 30 years had passed, and his childhood memories were blurred. You are Qin? Su Shimin asked with a trembling voice. Unlike Su Yueyun, Su Shimin recognized Su Qin the moment he saw him. When Su Qin entered the Shaolin temple, he was still 10 years old, and his eyebrows had grown a little. Even after 30 years, Su Shimin could still see the shadow of the 10-year-old Su Qin. Qiner, its third brother? Su Sungho and Su Chengyu looked at each other in disbelief. It's me. Su Qin said lightly. It's really third brother. Third brother, when did you arrive in Chang'an? The two family Su brothers immediately ran to Su Qin and looked him up and down. They were half surprised and half happy. Qin, what is going on? Su Shimin strode forward and looked at Su Qin in disbelief. Su Sungho and Su Chengyu also looked at Su Qin curiously. I stayed in the Shaolin temple for almost 30 years. I didn't want to stay any longer, so I left, Su Qin said calmly. I don't want to stay here anymore. Su Sungho and Su Chengyu looked at each other in disbelief. The Shaolin temple was a great martial arts sect in the world. A few years ago, it was rumored that the venerable arhat was in charge of it. How could such a behemoth let its disciples go so easily? Qiner, tell me honestly. What's going on? Did you commit a crime and escape? Su Shimin's expression kept changing. Finally, he asked solemnly. This was also what Su Shimin was most worried about. He was afraid that Su Qin would go astray. With the current foundation of the Shaolin temple, if Su Qin really makes a big mistake in the Shaolin temple, who can protect him? Father, if I really made a mistake, would I be able to walk out of the Shaolin temple? Su Qin shook his head and said. When Su Shimin heard this, his expression immediately eased. Indeed, he was a little worried just now. What kind of place was the Shaolin temple? Without the abbot's permission, would Su Qin be able to walk out? Ha ha ha. I didn't expect that today's Shangyuan festival would be the day our family reunited. Su Shimin was in a good mood. Little Qin, How did you know that our family Su moved to Chang'an? Su Sungho asked curiously. This? Su Qin had already thought of an answer. I went back to Yen City and heard from the people there that you are here. I see. Su Shimin nodded slightly. The fact that the family Su moved out of Tsangzhou was not a secret. He just had to ask anyone to find out. Little Qin, this time our family Su is successful. Guess who my little sister married? The crown prince. Our family Su is now a relative of the emperor. Su Chongyue became complacent and immediately shared this matter with Su Qin. Third brother. Su Yueyun stood up. Her pretty face was also full of joy. The few of them chatted for a while. Su Sungho and Su Qingyu asked questions here and there. After this conversation, everyone no longer had any doubts about Su Qin's identity. If it was a coincidence that there were two people in the world who looked similar, Su Qin obviously knew everything about the family Su. If Su Qin did not mention some things, even Su Sungho and Su Qingyu would have forgotten. Third brother, so many years have passed. Why do you look so young? Su Yueyun looked at Su Qin with some envy. After all, Su Qin was sent to the Shaolin Temple when he was 10 years old. Now almost 30 years had passed. Logically speaking, Su Qin at this age should be middle-aged and have experienced the vicissitudes of life. But now Su Qin had bright eyes, long black hair and jade-like skin. He was even more energetic than a 20-year-old youth. The other members of the Su family also noticed this and clicked their tongues in wonder. Maybe the Shaolin Temple's lamp and Buddha statue can slow down aging? Su Qin thought for a while and said. Although the venerable arhat could keep his youth forever, ordinary people could also live a long life if they stayed away from worldly disputes. I'm afraid that's the case, Su Shimin sighed. Su Qin's words made sense. But how many people in the world could give up everything in the world and be willing to stay away from the lamp and Buddha statue? Little Qin, I heard that there's an arhat in the Shaolin Temple. You've been in the Shaolin Temple for so long. Have you seen him? Su Sungho suddenly thought of something and asked with interest. For them, the venerable arhat was too far away from being a martial arts legend. If it weren't for Su Qin, they wouldn't even mention him. Su Shimin's eyes lit up when he heard this. Qiner, have you seen the venerable arhat? What kind of person is he? Su Shimin lowered his voice when he said this, as if he was afraid that the venerable arhat in the Shaolin Temple would hear him. Su Qin thought for a moment and said seriously, nothing special. He's about the same as me. Su Sungho heard this and said after a while, Little Qin, you're really good at joking. The other family Su people also chuckled. They thought that Su Qin probably hadn't seen the venerable arhat in the Shaolin Temple. Qiner, don't say such things in the future. The venerable arhat of Buddhism is very powerful. Maybe one day he'll know what you're saying. Su Shimin reminded Su Qin with a serious expression. They walked for a while and returned to the Su mansion. By the way, Qiner, what are you going to do this time? Su Shimin asked after a moment of hesitation. With the current status of the family Su, even if Su Qin didn't do anything, they could still support him for a lifetime. However, Su Shimin was born as a martial artist and hated those rich kids who only knew how to eat, drink and play. Therefore, Su Sungho and Su Chengyu joined the army early. Little Qin, you should join the army too. I can recommend you to the general. Su Sungho immediately suggested. That's not good. Little Qin doesn't have the talent for martial arts. If he really joins the army, not only will it be difficult for him to be promoted, but he will also be looked down upon. Su Chengyu shook his head and rejected. The rules in the army were very simple. Whoever had the biggest fist was the boss. With Su Qin's weak appearance, he would definitely be bullied. Su Yueyun hesitated for a while and couldn't help but say, Can I ask His Highness to let third brother work in the palace? His Highness is short of manpower now. Third brother can go to the East Palace as a counselor. Don't worry, it's just a title. He won't have to do anything. Hearing Su Yueyun's words, Su Sungho and Su Chengyu both nodded. The salary of a counselor to His Highness the Crown Prince would definitely be good. At least it would be much better than being a soldier in the army. Qiner, what do you think? Su Shimin was also quite satisfied. He looked at Su Qin and asked tentatively. No matter where he went, he always had to listen to Su Qin's wishes. If Su Qin didn't want to, the family Su didn't want to force him. The Imperial Palace, Su Qin slightly raised his head and looked in the direction of the imperial palace. Chapter 96. In the end, Su Qin agreed to Su Yuan's suggestion. His purpose for coming to Chang and city this time was to find a new place to sign in. Looking at the entire Chang and city, only the palace in the imperial city could have a large amount of Taoist connotation. After all, Chang'an City was the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. After thousands of years, the outer city had been rebuilt countless times. Only the imperial city had remained to this day. With Su Qin's current strength, unless there was a martial arts legend in the palace, sneaking in would be as simple as eating and drinking. But in any case, it was good to have an identity that could conceal his identity. At least Su Qin would have a reason to enter and leave the palace freely in the future. Okay, I'll tell His Highness when I go back tonight. Su Yuanyun was very concerned about his third brother's matter. After returning to the Eastern Palace, he mentioned this matter to Crown Prince Li Shang. And Crown Prince Li Shang naturally agreed without hesitation. One had to know that since Su Qin was Su Yuan's third brother, which meant that he was Li Shang's brother-in-law. If a family member wanted a job, of course he would not refuse. The next day, Su Qin officially moved into the Eastern Palace. And in order to please Su Qin, his brother-in-law, Crown Prince Li Shang even arranged the right spring square in the Eastern Palace for Su Qin. As expected of the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. Whether it's the layout or other aspects, it's almost perfect. Su Qin stood in the attic of the right spring square and looked at the entire imperial city. He nodded slightly in his heart. Compared to the vicissitudes of the Shaolin Temple, the imperial palace was another kind of majestic and domineering. Every corner revealed the supremacy of imperial power. I hope it won't disappoint me. A trace of anticipation flashed in Su Qin's eyes. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. During this month, Su Qin visited a small part of the palace. Sure enough, it was as Su Qin expected. He could also sign in at the palace. And to Su Qin's surprise, there were far more check-in locations in the imperial palace than in the Shaolin Temple. In the Shaolin Temple, the only places that could repeatedly sign in for Su Qin were the Demon Subduing Tower, the Scripture Pavilion, and the Bodhi Court. But in the palace, there were at least 5 places where Su Qin could repeatedly sign in. The reason why he said at least was because the palace was too big. There were still many places where Su Qin didn't sign in, so he had to use them at least. So far, Su Qin had signed in at the Longevity Hall, Stargazing Tower, Taiji Palace, White Jade Square, Crop Altar, and so on. For example, in the Temple of Immortals, Su Qin signed in and obtained a copy of the Longevity Secret Art. The art of longevity was a Taoist secret art. It was said to be able to refine one's qi to become immortal and prolong one's life. Every 100 years or hundreds of years, there would be news of a lucky person who obtained the art of longevity and was able to prolong one's life by decades or hundreds of years. The only pity is that the threshold for entering the longevity secret art is too high. It requires a kind of physique that is close to the Tao. It is precisely because of this that one can be extremely close to the profound meaning of the unity of heaven and man in the longevity secret art. However, how rare is a physique that is close to the Tao? 1 in a million people is even rarer than a grade 1 great grandmaster. In other words, even if others get the longevity secret art, it is very likely that they won't be able to enter it. But Su Qin is different. With the system's infusion, the so-called threshold of the longevity secret art can be ignored. On the night of obtaining the longevity secret art, Su Qin had already entered the longevity secret art. In the following month, Su Qin relied on his arhat level and quickly cultivated the longevity secret art to great accomplishment, extending his life by 200 years. 200 years of Shon, Su Qin's face was full of joy. 200 years of Shoyuan, plus the 800 years of Shoyuan of Venerable Arhat. As long as there are no accidents, Su Qin can live for more than 1,000 years. This is based on the premise that Su Qin will not make any progress in the next 1,000 years. 1,000 years, Su Qin's face was filled with emotion. The Empire of Tang has only been around for more than 500 years. Su Qin alone is equivalent to the Empire of Tang. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin was very satisfied. The only regret is that the threshold for entering the longevity secret art is too high and cannot be popularized. Even if Su Qin himself has cultivated it to great accomplishment, he can't let others learn this Taoist secret art. In addition to obtaining the longevity secret art at the Long Life Temple, Su Qin also obtained the star traction technique outside the stargazing tower. The star traction technique can draw the power of billions of stars for one's own use. It can be used to kill enemies and protect oneself. Of course, the star traction technique has very high requirements for the user. At least a peak first-grade condensed divine sense is qualified to cultivate it. And even a peak first-grade condensed divine sense can only draw one or a few stars at most. The effect is not too great. It has the same effect as the lunar body refining art. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. The lunar body refining technique can gather the power of the lunar body, and the star traction technique can draw the power of the stars. Perhaps others think that the moon is the moon and the stars are the stars, and the two are not the same thing at all. But Su Qin knows that even the moon and the sun in the sky are just one of the billions of stars. The difference between them is nothing more than distance. Other than that, Su Qin also obtained the white jade true body at the white jade square, the innate spirit liquid outside the crop altar in the imperial palace, and so on. The white jade true body is a body refining technique, similar to the invincible Vajra divine art of the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin is not interested in it. With his current physical body, even if he cultivates the white jade true body to great accomplishment, there won't be any improvement. But the innate spirit liquid of the crop altar made Su Qin happy for a long time. Innate spirit liquid is a magical liquid born from heaven and earth. It is extremely rare. Usually, only venerable arhat or martial arts legends can find 1 or 2 drops when they travel the world and are very lucky. But the effect of the innate spirit liquid is also very significant. It can greatly improve the cultivation progress of arhat level. After Su Qin obtained the innate spirit liquid, he tried to swallow a drop. As a result, his strength skyrocketed. If Su Qin didn't suppress it in time and wanted to wait until he had complete confidence to break through, he would have probably broken through to the 4th heavenly layer arhat realm by now. A drop of innate spirit liquid is probably comparable to 10 glazed golden cores, and it's the kind that doesn't take time to absorb. Su Qin exclaimed in his heart. One must know that even with the past Amitabha Sutra, Su Qin needs several days to completely absorb each glazed golden core. But the innate spirit liquid is different. Not only is it 10 times more effective than the glazed golden core, but it also saves Su Qin a lot of time. This in and out, the improvement of Su Qin's strength is simply terrifying. Sure enough, more people still need to come out and run around. If I continue to stay in the Shaolin Temple, when can I get these treasures? Su Qin couldn't help but smile. Chapter 97. I can't slack off, nor can I be satisfied with this. There are still many places in the palace that I haven't signed in yet. Su Qin gathered his thoughts and thought silently in his heart. Although with his strength it wouldn't take long for him to walk around the palace, he only had one chance to sign in every day. He needed to do it one by one. Calculating the time, it will take about half a year to sign in every place in the palace, Su Qin estimated in his heart. On this day, Su Yueyun asked Su Qin to have dinner with her and Crown Prince Li Sheng. Su Qin didn't refuse. Anyway, today's sign-in opportunity had been used up, and he had nothing to do for the time being. Soon, Su Qin came to Chang'an Hall. Chang'an Hall is the place where the Crown Prince lives in the East Palace. When Su Qin arrived, Crown Prince Li Sheng and Su Yueyun had been waiting for a long time. "Third brother, come here quickly." Crown Prince Li Sheng waved at Su Qin. He didn't have the dignity of a crown prince at all when facing Su Qin. Instead, he was very amiable, as if he was a real relative. "Third brother, how have you been in the palace recently? Can you get used to it?" After Su Qin sat down, Su Yueyun asked with concern. Although everything in the palace was good, it was too oppressive and cold. This was also the reason why Su Sengho and Su Chengyu would rather join the army. For some people who like to be lively, working in the palace is tantamount to being in prison. That was why Su Yueyun asked this question. "How have you been?" Su Qin quickly flashed through his mind. Innate spirit liquid, longevity secret, white jade true body, star traction, and many other treasures. Finally, He nodded and said seriously, very good. Third brother, just get used to it. Crown Prince Li Sheng nodded slightly and said with a smile, I was just talking to Yun Yang, third brother. Can you adapt to the palace? At this point, Crown Prince Li Sheng patted his head and hurriedly said, third brother, hurry up and eat. Today's meal was meticulously prepared by the palace's imperial chef. You can't eat it normally. Crown Prince Li Sheng immediately introduced them. Su Qin didn't have any requirements for this. Ever since he had attained the fruit of Arhat, he had long reached the realm of immortality as a qi eater. He did not need to replenish his energy through food. However, not needing to eat did not mean that Su Qin could not eat. At this moment, a palace maid walked in hurriedly. Your Highness, His Majesty is here. As soon as he said this, Crown Prince Li Sheng's expression changed slightly. Imperial Father is here? Crown Prince Li Sheng was just about to get up to greet him. The Emperor of Tang had already strode in and waved his hand directly. No need to salute, I'm just here to take a look. As you wish. Crown Prince Li Sheng hurriedly gave his seat to the Emperor of Tang and sat on the side. This little brother is? The Emperor of Tang turned his gaze and looked at Su Qin. Crown Prince Li Sheng immediately replied, Your Majesty, he is Yun Er's third brother. He has only recently returned to Chang'an. I haven't seen him before. It turns out to be someone from the family Su. The Emperor of Tang nodded and did not ask much. However, when Su Qin looked at the Emperor of Tang, his brows wrinkled. Because Su Qin clearly felt that the Emperor of Tang's body had long been depleted to the extreme. Logically speaking, even if he was a martial artist in the upper realm, he should be dead. Is it him? Su Qin glanced at a purple-clothed eunuch standing beside the Emperor of Tang. With Su Qin's eyesight, he naturally saw that this eunuch was a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. Moreover, he was a peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster whose body and divine sense had both transformed. Unfortunately, Su Qin just glanced at the purple-clothed eunuch and did not look at him anymore. Although this purple-clothed eunuch has completed the transformation of his body and divine sense, but because of his incomplete body, he will not be able to achieve the transformation of his body for the rest of his life. If the Demon Lord or Taoist Zhang had a slight possibility of entering Grade 1 Great Perfection, then this purple-clothed eunuch has completely cut off this hope. Life-linking secret technique? Su Qin opened eyes of truth, and instantly understood why the Emperor of Tang was still alive even though his body was so depleted. With the Emperor of Tang's body, he should have died long ago. But he was pulled back by the purple-clothed eunuch with a secret technique called life-linking secret technique. In other words, the Emperor of Tang was not consuming his own vitality at this moment, but the vitality of the purple-clothed eunuch. In a way, the longer the Emperor of Tang lives, the less Shoun the purple-clothed eunuch has left. Perceiving this, Su Qin looked at the purple-clothed eunuch with a higher degree of respect. Even if it is a close relative, there are very few people who can exchange their life for another's. What's more, with the strength of the purple-clothed eunuch, no one can force him to use this secret technique. But it's meaningless. Su Qin shook his head slightly. This life-linking secret technique is extremely complicated and consumes a lot of energy. For every year that the Emperor of Tang lives, the purple-clothed eunuch's vitality will be consumed for 3 to 5 years. Moreover, Su Qin could see that even if the purple-clothed eunuch was willing to use his own vitality to help the Emperor of Tang prolong his life. But at this moment the Emperor of Tang will not live for long. Just as Su Qin was thinking, the Emperor of Tang has sat down. Not bad, your wine is rare. The Emperor of Tang's eyes suddenly lit up and was about to take a sip. Your Majesty, take care of your body. Crown Prince Li Sheng was anxious and immediately advised. Take care of my body? Is my body not good? The Emperor of Tang put down the wine cup, frowned, and looked at Su Qin who was sitting silently. You are Yun Er's third brother, tell me, how is my body? Su Qin looked up at the Emperor of Tang, nodded and then shook his head. Oh, what do you mean? The Emperor of Tang asked with interest. Do you really want to know? Su Qin said casually. Of course. The Emperor of Tang nodded. Su Qin was silent for a while and said, I don't have long to live. As soon as these words came out, the whole Chang'an hall suddenly fell into a dead silence. Even Crown Prince Li Sheng, also opened his eyes wide and looked at Su Qin in disbelief. He never thought that Su Qin would dare to say such words in front of the emperor. Your Majesty, he just didn't mean. Crown Prince Li Shang was about to plead for Su Qin. At this moment, ha 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 ha, the Emperor of Tang suddenly laughed. Interesting. It's really interesting. A trace of ridicule appeared on the Emperor of Tang's face. I didn't expect that the words that all the civil and military officials dared not say would be said by a young man. The Emperor of Tang laughed for a while, coughed a few times, and his mood was obviously a little depressed. Come. The Emperor of Tang's voice just fell. Your Majesty. A little eunuch came up and stood respectfully on the side. Courage to speak reward. The Emperor of Tang took a deep look at Su Qin, got up and left Chang'an Hall. As you wish. The little eunuch bowed slightly and left Chang'an Hall. Soon after, he returned and said loudly, His Majesty's decree, reward 100 taels of gold and a piece of jade pendant. Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun looked at each other and didn't react for a long time. Chapter 98. In Chang'an Hall, Crown Prince Li Shang blinked. Originally, when Su Qin said that the Emperor of Tang was dying, he was ready to welcome His Majesty's anger. But the result, after all, His Majesty was not angry, and instead gave a reward? This Crown Prince Li Shang only felt extremely incredulous. Third brother, what's the matter with you? Su Yueyun barely broke free from the shock. What you just said about His Majesty, is it true? I stayed in the Shaolin Temple for so long and learned some medical skills. Su Qin casually found a reason. From the Emperor of Tang's complexion, he is indeed dying. When Su Yueyun heard this, he subconsciously looked at Crown Prince Li Shang, and a huge wave was set off in his heart. So much so that Su Yueyun and Crown Prince Li Shang did not notice that Su Qin called His Majesty the Emperor of Tang, not His Majesty. His Majesty is the title of a subordinate to a superior, and it implies submission. But the Emperor of Tang, it was a kind of equal and even meant that he did not care at all. After coming out of Chang'an Hall, Su Qin walked slowly on the road of the Imperial Palace. The Emperor of Tang is a bit interesting. Su Qin thought of the 100 taels of gold and the jade pendant that the Emperor of Tang rewarded him. But he's still dying. Su Qin shook his head slightly and did not pay attention to it. Even if there is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster to prolong the Emperor of Tang's life at all costs, it is useless. Next, Su Qin once again resumed his life of the past month. The Imperial Palace is quiet, and Su Qin is backed by the Crown Prince. As long as he does not take the initiative to cause trouble, almost no one dares to trouble him. Late at night, the full moon hung high in the sky. Long before I left the Shaolin Temple, I was already at the peak of the third heaven. The reason why I have suppressed my breakthrough until today is because I feel that there is a great risk in advancing from the third layer to the fourth layer. Su Qin sat cross-legged as he thought to himself. Arhat's breakthrough from the third heaven to the fourth heaven involved some kind of qualitative change. It was not as simple as the breakthrough from the first heaven to the second heaven or the second heaven to the third heaven. Let's wait a little longer and see if I can get Dining Sutra. Su Qin slowly got up and walked out of the pavilion. He looked up at the sky. When he was at level 9, Su Qin tempered his body with the Vajra unbreakable force and the Taiyin body refining technique. With the power of Yang and the power of Yin, his body transformed to a new level. It even made Su Qin and Shuyun soar. Now Su Qin has entered the realm of Arhat. Before he breaks through to the fourth heaven, he wants to do it again according to what he did when he was at level 9. However, for the current Su Qin, the Vajra unbreakable force and the Taiyin body refining technique have long lost their effect. I'm afraid that only the combination of the 9 powers of the 9 Yang divine force and the 9 powers of the 9 Yin Sutra will be useful. Unfortunately, as for the 9 Yang divine art, Su Qin had already obtained it from signing in at the Shaolin Temple. But the 9 Yin Sutra, no hurry. Take it slow. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Although the current martial arts doesn't have to walk the path of Yin and Yang coexistence, Su Qin noticed through the eyes of truth that he is most suitable for the coexistence of Yin and Yang. Pure infinite Yang or infinite Taiyin may not have any problems in a short time, but the later the cultivation, the hidden dangers will gradually be revealed. At that time there will be no turning back. By the way, Today's sign-in opportunity has been refreshed. Where was the place I signed in last time? Su Qin took a step and disappeared. When Su Qin appeared again, he was already standing in front of a huge temple. The ancestral temple of the Empire of Tang? Su Qin's eyes were calm as he slowly walked in. Su Qin seemed to notice something, and his eyes instantly focused on an old man guarding the entrance of the ancestral temple. The old man's hair and beard were white, and he stood there trembling as if he would be blown away by the wind at any time. The ancestral temple was huge, but only this old man was guarding it. I didn't expect the Empire of Tang to have so much heritage. Su Qin glanced at the old man with a thoughtful expression. This old man may be hiding from everyone in the palace, even the peak grade 1 eunuch in purple clothes. But in Su Qin's eyes, he directly discovered the other party's details. Impressively, he is also a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. However, for Su Qin, not to mention a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, even a grade 1 great perfection is nothing. Let's sign in at the ancestral temple first. Su Qin took a step forward and directly entered the ancestral temple. The light in the ancestral temple is extremely dim, but every corner is clean and tidy. Obviously, someone comes to clean every day. System sign in. Su Qin said in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtained the Emperor-level world suppression art. A mechanical and cold voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. Emperor-level world suppression art? Su Qin raised his eyebrows. The next moment, everything about the Emperor-level world suppression art poured into Su Qin's mind. The Emperor-level world suppression art is an Emperor-level divine art. When cultivated to the extreme, one can enter the legend realm. It is said that the founder of the Empire of Tang cultivated the Emperor-level world suppression art, and finally unified the world. With the help of the country's luck, he stepped into an incredible realm in one fell swoop, and finally crossed the sea in search of the longevity opportunity. Although it is of no use to me, but the concept can be used for reference. Su Qin carefully comprehended for a while, his thoughts fluctuating. At Su Qin's realm, he is no longer limited to a single Dao. Instead, he integrates hundreds of Daos and walks his own path. Not bad. It's a very interesting cultivation technique. Su Qin slightly nodded and made an evaluation of the Emperor-level world suppression art. The Empire of Tang's founder. Su Qin's gaze turned and looked at the highest place of the ancestral temple, the wooden tablet that belonged to the Empire of Tang's founder. Although the founder of the Empire of Tang finally crossed the sea and his life or death is unknown, the emperors of Tang still worship the founder here. I'm borrowing your place to tell you something. Su Qin's mind moved, and a stick of sandalwood flew over and fell into the incense burner. Buzz! The sandalwood incense burned without wind, and smoke rose into the air. It's time to go back. Su Qin's figure disappeared. Half an hour later, the old man guarding outside the ancestral temple wobbled into the ancestral temple. Founder, you've been gone for 500 years. The old man sighed softly, picked up a stick of sandalwood, and with a pious expression, prepared to put it into the incense burner to worship the founder. This was what he did every day. For 60 years, ever since he guarded the ancestral temple, he had never stopped. However, the next moment, he was stunned. Although there was no change in the incense burner in front of him, the old man could still smell a trace of burning sandalwood. This trace of smell was very faint and almost undetectable. Even normal people would subconsciously ignore it. But in the old man's eyes, it was no different from a bolt from the blue. In an instant, the old man's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his bent waist was instantly straightened. Someone has been here? The old man suddenly raised his head and looked around. Extreme shock flashed in the depths of his eyes. Chapter 99. Someone has been here? Inside the ancestral temple, the old man's heart was in turmoil. The world only knew that the purple-robed eunuch Zhao in the palace of the Emperor of Tang was a peak rank 1. But in fact, other than eunuch Zhao, he, the temple keeper who had guarded the ancestral temple of the Empire of Tang for decades, was also a peak rank 1. The Empire of Tang had been established for more than 500 years, and its founder was a martial arts legend. Although he eventually crossed the sea and no one knew whether he was alive or dead, The Empire of Tang's foundation was still unfathomable. On the surface, Eunuch Zhao was in charge of everything, but in the dark, the temple keeper watched coldly from the sidelines. However, the fact that the temple keeper was a peak rank one was related to the foundation of the Empire of Tang. Even the Emperor of Tang did not know. Not only that, but the temple keeper was different from Eunuch Zhao. Eunuch Zhao was loyal to the Emperor of Tang. For the Emperor of Tang, he was willing to give up his life. But the temple keeper was different. The temple keeper was not loyal to the Emperor of Tang, but to the Empire of Tang. As long as the Empire of Tang still existed, and the person sitting on the throne was surnamed Li, the temple keeper would not appear. Impossible. Who in the palace can sneak into the ancestral temple without being noticed? The temple keeper's scalp went numb as he stared at the incense burner in front of him. He had been guarding outside the ancestral temple, and did not notice anyone sneaking in. But now he smelled a wisp of sandalwood on the incense burner in the ancestral temple. What did this mean? This meant that someone had walked into the ancestral temple in front of him, and put a piece of sandalwood on it openly? How was this possible? One had to know that he was a peak rank one. With him standing guard outside, even if an ant crawled in, he would know like the back of his hand. But someone had sneaked in and put a piece of sandalwood on it. Despite such a huge commotion, the temple keeper, who was close at hand, was unaware of it. If not for the lingering smell of sandalwood, he might not even know that someone had snuck in today. Could it be a grade 1 great perfection? The temple keeper's thoughts raced, but in the end, he shook his head and denied this idea. The strength of a grade 1 great perfection is certainly higher than that of a peak grade 1. However, the temple keeper is a peak grade 1 who has transformed twice. Even if he is not as strong as a grade 1 great perfection, it is unrealistic to say that a grade 1 great perfection can treat the ancestral temple as nothing in front of him. Things have gotten troublesome. A true dragon has come to the palace, the temple keeper murmured. Although he did not know who had infiltrated the ancestral temple, he could vaguely sense that the other party did not have any ill intentions. After all, in the eyes of the guardian of the temple, unless the great ancestor who crossed the sea 500 years ago returned, the entire palace of the Emperor of Tang would be at the mercy of the other party. However, in reality, the Emperor of Tang's palace was still the same as before. Right Spring Square. Su Qin's figure appeared silently. Right. After lighting the sandalwood just now, I ignored it. If the peak grade 1 temple keeper returns to the ancestral temple at this time, maybe he will notice something? Su Qin touched his chin, and in the blink of an eye, he was too lazy to think about it. For Su Qin, even if the temple keeper really found out that someone had entered the ancestral temple, so what? With his trivial peak grade 1 strength, it is impossible to find Su Qin by following that aura. However, with the innate spirit liquid, there is no need to rearrange the grand array, Su Qin thought silently. The main function of the Essence Gathering Holy Land Array is to gather the world's essence qi within a few miles to achieve the effect of improving the cultivation speed. But now, after obtaining the innate spirit liquid, Su Qin does not need the world's essence qi at all. All the consumption during cultivation can be provided by the innate spirit liquid. As a treasure born in heaven and earth, the innate spirit liquid is pure in nature. There is no need for Su Qin to refine it, it can be absorbed by him naturally. Just in terms of cultivation quality, the innate spirit liquid is far superior to the world's essence qi. Of course, what Su Qin doesn't care about is the Essence Gathering Holy Land Array that gathers tens of miles. If one day Su Qin can arrange the Essence Gathering Holy Land Array that gathers the world's Essence Gathering Holy Land Array that covers thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles, or even the entire continent, then it will be a different story. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. If the world's essence qi within tens of thousands of miles is really gathered in one place, then the terrifying effect is definitely not worse than the innate spirit liquid, or even better. In the following time, Su Qin spent most of his time signing in at the imperial palace. Occasionally, he would be called by his little sister, Su Yueyun, to eat the meals carefully prepared by the imperial chef. Sometimes he would also run into the Emperor of Tang. Ever since Su Qin's shocking words last time, the Emperor of Tang obviously thought more highly of Su Qin and often asked some questions. Su Qin was a little impatient with this and usually just casually said a few words to muddle through it. He came to the Emperor of Tang's palace to sign in, not to answer the Emperor of Tang's questions. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye 2 months passed. In these 2 months, Su Qin has signed in at least half of the Emperor of Tang's palace and gained a lot. On this day, Su Qin was walking slowly in the imperial palace. With the identity of a counselor and the brother-in-law of Crown Prince Li Shang, Su Qin can basically go in and out of the Eastern Palace. Even outside the Eastern Palace, as long as he doesn't get close to some important places of the Imperial Palace, he won't be questioned. Just as Su Qin was thinking about where to sign in today, suddenly, a group of people walked over quickly. From the clothes of these people, it was obvious that they weren't from the Empire of Tang, and there were eunuchs from the Imperial Palace leading the way. In addition to the eunuchs, there was also a small team of the Imperial Palace's Forbidden Army following them. They seemed to be protecting this group of people, but in fact they were secretly monitoring this group of people. Nanming diplomatic mission? Su Qin glanced at them casually and found the words on the clothes of this group of people, and he roughly confirmed their identity. In this world, many countries existed side by side. Among them, the Empire of Tang was the most prosperous, occupying the vast central plains. And the area south of the Empire of Tang, near the sea, was ruled by Nanming. This generation of Ming Emperor was a man of great talent and vision, and he was in the prime of his life. Since he ascended the throne, he had purged the imperial palace and gathered power. Now that 20 years had passed, the entire Nanming was like an iron bucket, and it was a thorn in the side of the Empire of Tang. In addition, Ming Emperor also established the Genie Guard organization to investigate the various countries and collect information from the world. Even the Meng Yuan Empire, which occupied the endless grasslands in the north, had spies from the Genie Guard. However, even if the various countries were at daggers drawn, and the rulers of each country couldn't wait to kill each other the next day, they still had to maintain the basic face. Every once in a while, the Empire of Tang and Nanming would have diplomatic missions. The main purpose of these diplomatic missions was to maintain the relationship between the two countries, or to pass some information. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and his divine sense swept through. Su Qin seemed to have found something, and his eyes fell on the group of Nanming diplomatic mission again, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. Chapter 100. Interesting. Su Qin's gaze faintly swept over several people in the Nanming diplomatic mission. These people were very inconspicuous, and their heads were slightly lowered, as if they were afraid of offending a certain noble in the imperial palace. But only Su Qin noticed that these people vaguely revealed a trace of killing intent. This killing intent was extremely hidden and hidden deep in their hearts. Even a peak grade 1 great grandmaster like Eunuch Zhao may not be able to detect it. But unfortunately, this group of people met Su Qin. Venerable Arhat's divine sense is meticulous. Although it is not as good as Buddhism's divine sense, this group of people wanting to hide from Su Qin is tantamount to wishful thinking. Killing intent? They are still hiding their strength? This group of people from the Nanming diplomatic mission came to the Emperor of Tang's palace for other purposes. Su Qin's eyes were thoughtful. It is impossible for the Ming Emperor not to know that these people have sneaked into the Nanming diplomatic mission. All of this was ordered by the Ming Emperor. In other words, the Ming Emperor may be preparing to attack the Empire of Tang. In fact, it is not wrong for the Ming Emperor to have such a plan. Now that the Emperor of Tang is in his old age, although he has appointed a crown prince, all the princes have different thoughts. The situation is chaotic. If the Ming Emperor does not take advantage of this opportunity to take action, he would be a hero of a generation. The battle between two countries is not open and above board. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. These people are preparing to assassinate the Emperor of Tang? Su Qin guessed in his heart, but he does not think that this possibility is very high. The Emperor of Tang is always guarded by Eunuch Zhao. These assassins have hidden killing intent. If they do not take action, Eunuch Zhao may not find out. But once they are ready to take action, they will leak their aura. With the ability of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, these people will probably die in an instant. It was impossible to pose any threat to the Emperor of Tang. If the Emperor of Tang could be assassinated so easily, he would have died a long time ago. With Ming Emperor's methods, It was impossible for him to be so shallow and crude. But what does this have to do with me? Even if there were really assassins from Nanming causing trouble in the palace, as long as it doesn't affect the Eastern Palace, it has nothing to do with me. No matter how chaotic it is outside, I just need to sign in on time. Su Qin pondered for a while, then stopped thinking about it. How could the Emperor of Tang's palace not be able to deal with a few foreign assassins? When Su Qin returned to the right spring square, he found that a palace made from the East Palace had been waiting outside for a long time. Young Master Su, His Highness wants you to go to Chang'an Hall. The palace maid bowed slightly to Su Qin and said in a low voice, "Got it." Su Qin looked at the sky and probably knew that Crown Prince Li Shang wanted to invite him to taste the meal carefully prepared by the imperial chefs. Soon, Su Qin came to Chang'an Hall. Sure enough, the table was already filled with fragrant delicacies. "Third brother, sit down quickly." Crown Prince Li Shang smiled at Su Qin. After they ate for a while, Su Qin looked at Su Yueyun and asked casually, "After so many years you haven't given birth to any children?" When Su Qin said this, Su Yueyun's face changed. Crown Prince Li Shang, who was eating happily, also had a dim look in his eyes. "Third brother, I'm not in good health. The imperial doctors have seen me many times, but they can't do anything." After a long time, Su Yueyun opened her mouth and said. In fact, Su Yueyun had not given birth to any children for so many years, which had long caused dissatisfaction among the court officials. There were even officials who came forward to impeach her. The imperial family valued the continuation of children the most. If Su Yueyun, as the crown princess, did not have the ability to give birth to children, it would even affect the stability of the crown prince's position. If the Emperor of Tang had not suppressed it, this matter would have been blown out of proportion. Don't worry, there will definitely be a way." Crown Prince Li Shang looked at Su Yueyun and could not help but comfort her. Su Yueyun heard this and shook her head slightly. A way? If there was a way, how could it have been delayed until now? Over the years, who knew how many imperial doctors had seen Su Yueyun? Even the personal imperial doctor of the Emperor of Tang had personally checked Su Yueyun and finally concluded that the yin qi had entered her body too deeply, and there was no way to reverse the situation. Fortunately, the imperial doctor was only loyal to the Emperor of Tang, and did not spread this matter around. "If you believe me, you can let me take a look." Su Qin glanced at Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun's expressions and said casually, "Let third brother take a look?" Su Yueyun's face was full of doubts. Although he trusted Su Qin very much, what was the use of Su Qin taking a look when even so many imperial doctors had no clue? Take a look at third brother." At the side, Crown Prince Li Shang seemed to have thought of something and immediately urged. He suddenly remembered that some time ago, Su Qin had only taken a glance at the Emperor of Tang's conclusion that he did not have long to live. Although he did not know whether Su Qin's words were true or not, at least the Emperor of Tang did not blame him at that time. "Okay," Su Yueyun nodded. Then, Su Qin put his hand on Su Yueyun's pulse. In fact, he had already used his divine sense to scan Su Yueyun's body inch by inch. The reason why he still needed to check the pulse was nothing more than to further confirm. "Yin qi has entered the body." Su Qin put down his hand and shook his head. As soon as these words came out, Su Yueyun's eyes were obviously disappointed. Crown Prince Li Shang next to him also sighed softly in his heart. He remembered very clearly that the Emperor of Tang's personal imperial doctor also said the same thing. Then the next sentence was powerless to reverse the situation. However, the next moment, Su Qin said lightly, "It's a small problem." After signing in at the Shaolin Temple for almost 30 years, in addition to countless secret manuals, Su Qin also obtained many medical books. In a way, Su Qin's medical skills at the moment were definitely not inferior to any imperial doctor in the world. Even compared to those imperial doctors, Su Qin could use his divine sense to completely heal the most minute parts. Therefore, for other imperial doctors, Su Yueyun's yin qi had entered the body and was powerless to reverse the situation, but in the eyes of Su Qin, it was just a small problem. "What?" As soon as Su Qin's voice fell, Crown Prince Li Shang suddenly opened his eyes wide and almost thought that he had heard wrongly. "Third brother, what did you just say?" Su Yueyun also couldn't believe it and looked at Su Qin in disbelief. "I said I can cure it." Su Qin paused for a moment and continued. Give me a pen and paper. Someone. Quickly bring the pen and paper. Crown Prince Li Shang immediately stood up and quickly said to the eunuch who was waiting next to him. Yes. The eunuch hurriedly left. Soon after, he brought the pen and paper and respectfully placed it in front of Su Qin. Su Qin casually wrote a dozen herbs to form a prescription and then put the pen aside. Boil the soup according to the herbs on the prescription and drink a bowl in the morning and a bowl in the evening every day for 30 days. Su Qin said lightly. In fact, this prescription was just on the surface. When Su Qin checked Su Yuan's pulse just now, he used his true essence to remove most of the yin qi in his body. If it weren't for the fact that Su Yuan's body couldn't bear it, Su Qin could completely cure it on the spot instead of using this prescription to slowly remove the remaining yin qi. Chapter 101. This prescription, Su Yuan muttered to herself as she picked up the prescription with trembling hands. If she was still skeptical of Su Qin's words at the beginning, then now, as Su Qin wrote down the prescription, Su Yuan believed most of it. Although Su Yuan and Su Qin haven't seen each other for almost 30 years, but just by getting along with each other during this time, Su Yuan knows that Su Qin isn't the kind of person who likes to talk big. Since Su Qin said so, he must be very confident. Third brother, thank you. Crown Prince Li Shang's eyes were a little red. If possible, who didn't want to have a descendant? It's okay. It's just a small matter. Su Qin waved his hand and said casually. Helping Su Yuan get rid of the yin qi was really nothing for Su Qin. It was as simple as eating and drinking. Okay. I'll go back first. Su Qin got up and walked out of the hall. Crown Prince Li Shang immediately followed and only stopped to return after sending Su Qin out of the right spring square. Shenzhen Hall. Crown Prince Li Shang hurried back. Yuner, have you passed down the prescription? Crown Prince Li Shang asked anxiously as soon as he saw Su Yuan. It's already been done. Su Qin's Yuan was obviously a little nervous. She looked at Crown Prince Li Shang expectantly and said, Will it work this time? It'll definitely work. Crown Prince Li Shang nodded seriously. At the same time, in a mansion somewhere in Chang'an City, a middle-aged man in a white robe sipped his tea and looked in the direction of the palace. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a chubby man who looked like a rich merchant carefully walked in and stopped not far from the white-robed man. Greetings, Lord Town Guardian. The chubby merchant had a cautious look on his face, as if the white-robed man in front of him was some kind of wild beast. If an intelligence officer of the Tang dynasty was here, he would be shocked to hear the words, Guardian Envoy. This was because the Guardian was a high-ranking official of the Nanming Embroidered Uniform Guard, second only to the commander. Even in the entire Embroidered Uniform Guard organization, there were only 3 guardians. Each of them had a high position and power, causing the court officials to tremble in fear. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a person like the town councilor to take the risk and enter the Empire of Tang alone, let alone sneak into Chang'an City. If the town governor fell into the hands of the Empire of Tang, Nanming would not only lose a town governor, but also countless intelligence agencies and even the spy network that Nanming had set up in the Empire of Tang. With the status of the town governor in the Embroidered Uniform Guard, if he casually revealed anything, it would be enough to cause the entire Nanming to suffer heavy losses. Get up. The white-robed man's eyes didn't even lift as he spoke in an indifferent tone. Yes. The chubby businessman stood respectfully to the side. After a moment, the white-robed man suddenly asked, How's it going? Your Excellency, our people have already mixed in with the diplomatic corps and entered the palace. The chubby businessman immediately said, Good. The white-robed man nodded slightly and said indifferently. In his eyes, sneaking into the palace was just the first step. He didn't need to pay too much attention to it. Your Excellency, may I ask if His Majesty's target this time is the Emperor of Tang? The chubby businessman saw that the white-robed man was in a good mood and asked cautiously. In his view, for the Southern Ming Empire to let the white-robed man, a town envoy, personally take such a risk, they must have a big plan. And in the entire imperial palace, there was nothing more beneficial than assassinating the Tang Emperor. Once the Emperor of Tang died, the Empire of Tang would be in chaos. At that time, Nanming could take advantage of the situation and march all the way north to Chang'an City. Thinking of this, the chubby businessman's eyes flashed with a trace of heat. If things were to develop according to this trend, they would be able to establish an everlasting merit. For so many years, Nanming had been suppressed in the south by the Empire of Tang and couldn't expand to the north. If they took this opportunity to open the door to the Empire of Tang, with the current Ming Emperor's great talent and great strategy, they might be able to sweep across the world and unify the world. Assassinate the Emperor of Tang? The white-robed man glanced at the chubby businessman and said, "With the protection of the purple-robed eunuch, the Emperor of Tang won't die." Speaking of this, the white-robed man shook his head slightly. For so many years, although Nanming and the Tang dynasty often had diplomatic relations on the surface, no one knew how many times they had fought in secret. Naturally, they knew how terrible the purple-robed eunuch was. Then, the chubby businessman was slightly stunned. After thinking for a while, he asked tentatively, "Are you going to assassinate those princes?" Except for the Emperor of Tang and the princes, the chubby businessman couldn't think of anyone who was worth the visit of the guardian of the brocade guards. "Princes?" The white-robed man smiled and said, "His Majesty can't wait for those princes to bite each other. How can he bear to let them die? You don't have to guess. The target of the brocade guards this time is the crown prince." The white-robed man took another sip of tea and said lightly, "The crown prince?" The chubby businessman was slightly stunned. As far as he knew, the current crown prince of the Empire of Tang was established by the Emperor of Tang despite the opposition of many ministers. He had no foundation in Chang'an City. The chubby businessman even suspected that the crown prince was deliberately promoted by the Emperor of Tang as a means to deceive others. "You don't understand." The white-robed man's tone was calm. "His Majesty knows the Emperor of Tang too well. This old fox won't do anything meaningless." Also, the brocade guards found a more interesting piece of information. 30 years ago, the Emperor of Tang met a palace maid. A year later, they gave birth to a son. However, the Empress was jealous at that time, and the palace maid died not long after the child was born. At that time, the court was unstable. The Emperor of Tang needed the power of the aristocratic families behind the Empress, so he could only send the palace maid's child to the common people. Not long ago, a son of the royal family who returned from the common people was made the crown prince. The white-robed man looked at the chubby businessman, and a trace of deep meaning appeared on his face. "Don't you think it's a coincidence?" "What do you mean, guardian?" The chubby businessman's thoughts turned quickly, and he asked subconsciously, "The death of the crown prince is not only a blow to the Emperor of Tang, but also stimulates the other princes. Because the mountain above them is gone, they can fight each other legitimately again. And this is the scene that His Majesty likes to see the most." The white-robed man said slowly, "In a few days, the crown prince and the crown princess will leave the palace through the Black Tortoise Gate and go to the family suite. Your people can take action before then. Remember, you must not let the crown prince reach the Black Tortoise Gate alive." The white-robed man said. Whether it was the East Palace or the Black Tortoise Gate, there were a large number of palace guards. But between the East Palace and the Black Tortoise Gate, there was an empty area. The palace's defensive forces couldn't be said to be without, but they were definitely the least. It was also the place where they had the highest chance of succeeding in the assassination. And once the crown prince walked out of the Black Tortoise Gate, he would definitely be protected by the Forbidden Army. In that case, they would have no chance. "Yes." The chubby merchant bowed and said. "In front of the Weiyang Palace." Su Qin stopped and looked up at the palace in front of him. "This should be the first time I signed in here." Su Qin thought for a moment, and a smile appeared on his face. Su Qin said in his heart, "System, sign in." Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the Sunflower Manual. Chapter 102. Sunflower Treasure Book? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and his expression was quite helpless. As early as when he was living in the Shaolin Temple, Su Qin had heard of the Sunflower Treasure Book. In fact, in other aspects, the Sunflower Treasure Book is definitely above the vast majority of martial arts in Jianghu. But if you want to cultivate the Sunflower Treasure Book, there is a prerequisite. If you want to cultivate this art, you must castrate yourself first. Moreover, the biggest hidden danger of cultivating the sunflower treasure book is that because the body is incomplete, it is impossible to complete the transformation of the body. The purple-clothed eunuch beside the Emperor of Tang was like this. Of course, even with such a big flaw, the sunflower treasure book is still worthy of the name of evil art. After all, how many martial artists in the world can touch the transformation of the body of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster? Instead of worrying about this, it's better to master powerful strength first. It's a pity. I wasted a sign and opportunity. Su Qin shook his head slightly, feeling a little regretful in his heart. According to one sign and opportunity per day, Su Qin still has more than 970 years of Shouyuan, and he can sign in a total of less than 400,000 times. Every time he uses it, he will have one less chance. However, although I can't use the sunflower treasure book, it has some merits regarding the operation of an internal force. What kind of insight does Su Qin have? With his current realm, who knows how much higher than the founder of the sunflower treasure book? With just a casual glance, he could perceive the true merits of the sunflower treasure book. Not bad, not bad. It's not like I didn't gain anything. Su Qin nodded slightly and prepared to return to the right spring square. In the next few days, Su Qin basically comprehended the golden Buddha, that symbolized the complete inheritance of Buddha's palm. Moonlight shone. Su Qin sat cross-legged. Buddha's palm has a total of 9 styles. Now I can only comprehend one style. As for the other 8, I can't comprehend them for the time being. Su Qin rubbed his eyebrows and thought silently in his heart. In fact, Su Qin was also aware that the golden body of Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows would not impart to him the remaining 8 clans. With Su Qin's current strength, withstanding one move of the Buddha's palm was already his limit. As for more, it was basically impossible. It was like a bottle that could only hold 1 bowl of water, but if you wanted it to hold 10 or 100 bowls of water, the only result would be that the bowl would explode. There's no rush. Take your time. Anyway, what I have the most is time. Su Qin was not greedy. Now that he had mastered so many unique skills, even if he couldn't comprehend the Buddha's palm, he could comprehend others. Besides, even if there was only one move of the Buddha's palm, it would be enough for Su Qin to comprehend for a long time. However, the Empire of Tang is worthy of being a powerful country. In addition to the 2 great grandmasters in the imperial palace, there are so many grade 1 great grandmasters. Su Qin turned his gaze and looked at the Emperor of Tang palace. During this time, while he was signing in, he also swept through the heritage of the Emperor of Tang Palace. In the Emperor of Tang Palace, there are 23 grade 1 great grandmasters. What kind of terrifying number was this? It must be known that any grade 1 great grandmaster can establish a great sect and move unhindered in a region. But the Emperor of Tang Palace actually has 23 of them? And this is just the number of grade 1 great grandmasters in the imperial palace. In the border army of the Tang dynasty, there must be other grade 1 great grandmasters guarding it. Conservatively speaking, the Empire of Tang has no less than 30 grade 1 great grandmasters, and may even be close to 40. It's just that Su Qin thought about it and felt that it was normal. Perhaps grade 1 great grandmasters are very rare in the whole world, but if all the grade 1 great grandmasters in the world are gathered together, the number will be very considerable. The Empire of Tang occupies the vast and rich central plains, and has countless cultivation resources and people. It is easy to cultivate some martial Dao powerhouses. Of course, even if the Empire of Tang is so powerful, its limit is to cultivate some grade 1 great grandmasters. As for the peak grade 1 and even venerable Arhat and legends, it is impossible to cultivate them. The next day, Crown Prince Li Shang asked Su Qin if he wanted to leave the imperial palace with them and return to the Su residence. Su Qin thought for a while and nodded in agreement. He hasn't gone back for a while, and now is the right time to take a look. After a while, Su Qin let Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun meet up. Su Yueyun's complexion was obviously much better. Obviously, Su Qin's prescription was effective. After chatting for a while, they walked out of the East Palace and prepared to go to the Black Tortoise Gate. When leaving the Imperial Palace, Su Qin suddenly stopped and looked at the Nanming diplomatic mission coming towards him. Third brother, what's wrong with you? They are Nanming's diplomatic mission. Su Yueyun thought that Su Qin was curious and explained. However, before Su Yueyun could finish, The group of Nanming diplomatic mission that was slowly walking towards them suddenly exploded. Kill! In an instant, a bone-chilling killing intent spread out and shrouded them. Not good. There are assassins. Crown Prince Li Shang was shocked and instinctively stood in front of Su Yueyun. Protect the Crown Prince. Protect the Crown Prince. At this time, some of the confidants that Crown Prince Li Shang has trained over the years reacted and surrounded the Crown Prince and Su Yueyun. Can't even withstand a single blow. A cold-looking man in the Nanming diplomatic mission unsheathed his long saber. With a flash of the saber, many of the Crown Prince's confidants fell to the ground. We have to hurry. A sense of urgency suddenly rose in the cold-looking man's heart. Although this was an unguarded area of the imperial palace, they had made such a big commotion that a large number of forbidden army would arrive in at most 5 seconds. In other words, they had to kill the Crown Prince in 5 seconds at the latest. Otherwise, if a large number of forbidden army arrived, killing the Crown Prince would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. As for what would happen after 5 seconds, for all the Nanming assassins present, since they dared to assassinate the imperial palace, they did not expect to return alive. Die! The cold-looking man's saber flashed and slashed at Crown Prince Li Shang from afar. Your Highness, run! At this time, one of the Crown Prince's confidants rushed over and pushed him down, barely dodging the saber. However, the Crown Prince dodging the saber did not mean that the saber had disappeared. The dazzling saber flashed and disappeared, slashing at a figure behind the Crown Prince. The cold-looking man frowned and looked at the spot where the saber flashed and saw a man standing there quietly. It's him? The cold-looking man recognized him immediately. As an assassin before the assassination, he had already memorized all the information about Crown Prince Li Shang. This man with Crown Prince Li Shang should be Crown Princess Su Yun's third brother, Su Qin. Fine. I'll kill you first, then the Crown Prince. There's still time. The cold-looking man's eyes flashed with madness, and the saber flashed brighter and faster. Die! The cold-looking man looked at Su Qin as if he was looking at a dead man. However, just as the cold-looking man was about to kill Su Qin and immediately attack Crown Prince Li Shang, Su Qin, who had been standing there motionlessly, raised his head slightly and looked at the cold-looking man. The cold-looking man subconsciously looked at Su Qin. However, when he looked around, he felt as if he had arrived at a dark void. This is... The cold-looking man's expression froze, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. All he saw was dreamy and deep, as if there was a dark vortex spinning slowly. At the end of his vision, the cold-looking man saw 9 suns in the sky. At first, the 9 suns were extremely far away, but in an instant they expanded and burned fiercely. Finally, they burned the void and swallowed everything. Chapter 103. The Emperor of Tang's Palace. The Crown Prince was assassinated. The originally harmless Nanming diplomatic mission suddenly erupted, and a chilling killing intent filled every inch of the air. Almost in an instant, the vice-commander of the Forbidden Army guarding the Black Tortoise Gate suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the Crown Prince's location. The vice-commander is a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, and is responsible for guarding the Imperial City. He is extremely sensitive to auras, let alone this kind of killing intent. Not good. There is a problem with the Crown Prince. The vice-commander of the Forbidden Army's expression was extremely ugly. Although the Crown Prince was some distance away from the Black Tortoise Gate at this moment, if something really happened to the Crown Prince, His Majesty will hold him accountable. The life and death of the Crown Prince is related to the foundation of the Empire of Tang. At that time, even if he is a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, he will inevitably be punished. Send some people and come with me. The vice-commander of the Forbidden Army took a step forward. His whole person turned into a phantom, and rushed towards the place where the killing intent emerged. The vice-commander of the Forbidden Army's reaction speed was already very fast. When he noticed the killing intent, it took him a moment. When he moved, it took him another moment. Then, from the Black Tortoise Gate to the Crown Prince's location, it took him 3 seconds. From the beginning of the assassination to the arrival of the vice-commander of the Forbidden Army, only 5 seconds passed. What can you do in 5 seconds? For ordinary people, blinking a few times is equivalent to a dozen seconds. However, for the vice commander of the Forbidden Army, these 5 seconds felt like years, and he was burning with anxiety. The vice commander of the Forbidden Army was very clear that to be able to assassinate the crown prince in the Emperor of Tang's palace, there must be a very careful plan. If there is no certain certainty, these assassins hidden in the imperial palace will not take action. Since they took action, it means that these assassins feel that the assassination will succeed. Your Highness the Crown Prince, I hope you can hold on until I get there. The vice commander of the Forbidden Army's thoughts turned quickly, and the internal strength in his body almost boiled. The next moment, the vice commander of the Forbidden Army rushed over and was about to take action to suppress the assassins. He saw a scene that he would never forget. The assassins, who had been brimming with killing intent, shuddered. Then their bodies began to burn. Before they could even scream, they were reduced to ashes. This is... The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army trembled in shock. Before he had rushed over, he had thought of countless possibilities. He had even considered the possibility that the crown prince had died at the hands of the assassins. But the only thing he didn't expect was the scene in front of him. It would be understandable if these assassins were smashed into meat paste or chopped in half. However, for them to spontaneously combust and turn into ashes was beyond the imagination of the Forbidden Army's vice commander. Crown Prince Li Shang and his confidants were also stunned. A moment ago they were facing a life-and-death crisis, and could have died at the hands of these assassins at any time. But now such an unbelievable scene was happening. At this moment, large numbers of the Forbidden Army began to arrive. The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army suppressed the shock in his heart and shouted, "Protect His Highness the Crown Prince." No matter what happened, the safety of the Crown Prince had to be the top priority. "Third brother, are you okay?" Su Yueyun barely recovered from her shock. She tugged at Su Qin's arm and asked in a low voice, "I'm fine." Su Qin shook his head and glanced at the ashes left behind by the assassins. Long before the Nanming diplomatic mission entered the palace, he had already discovered that these Nanming diplomatic mission had other plans. However, at that time, Su Qin felt that as long as these assassins didn't affect the Eastern Palace, or him and his little sister, the Crown Prince, he couldn't be bothered to intervene. In the entire palace of the Emperor of Tang, Su Qin only knew a few people, including Su Yueyun and Li Shang. As for the others, Su Qin didn't care about the lives of the princes and eunuchs. But what Su Qin didn't expect was that the target of these assassins was actually Crown Prince Li Shang. Ming Emperor, Su Qin's expression didn't change. Deep in his eyes he was deep in thought. "Third brother, it's okay. It's all over now." Su Yueyun thought that Su Qin was scared out of his wits and hurriedly comforted him. Nanming diplomatic mission? Damn it! At this time, the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army had a rough idea of what had happened. He knew that these assassins who suddenly attacked were from the Nanming diplomatic mission. "Your Highness, I will personally escort you back to the Eastern Palace." The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army bowed to Crown Prince Li Shang. Okay. Crown Prince Li Shang was also feeling uneasy. He was not in the mood to leave the palace. He immediately returned to the Eastern Palace with Su Yueyun, Su Qin, and the others. The Eastern Palace was where the Crown Prince lived. It was usually patrolled by large numbers of the Forbidden Army. It was impossible for assassins to use the identity of a diplomatic mission to assassinate him. It could even be said that no diplomatic mission from any country could even enter the Eastern Palace, let alone assassinate him. A moment later, in the Immortal Palace, the Emperor of Tang listened to the report of the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army. His expression was impassive. The Immortal Palace was the bedroom of the Emperor of Tang for generations. It meant longevity and longevity. "I understand. You may leave." The Emperor of Tang waved his hand and said softly, "As you wish." The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army breathed a sigh of relief. Although the Crown Prince was not dead and the assassins were all killed, the matter seemed to have been resolved satisfactorily. But such a big mistake had occurred in the Imperial Palace, openly allowing assassins from other countries to assassinate the Crown Prince. As the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army guarding the Xuanwu Gate, he had to bear some responsibility. And now the Emperor of Tang had asked him to leave. Obviously, he was too lazy to pursue the matter. After the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army left, the Emperor of Tang's face gradually darkened. Ming Emperor, how dare you? Do you really think I don't dare to fall out with you? A trace of anger appeared on the Emperor of Tang's face. Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Eunuch Zhao, dressed in purple, walked out and bowed. The assassination of the Crown Prince is a matter of great importance. At this moment in Chang'an City, there must be someone important enough in Nanming to command the overall situation. Now that the assassination has failed, the news has not been leaked yet. Why don't we take the opportunity to capture that person? Eunuch Zhao said slowly. That's right. The Emperor of Tang was silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. If they could capture a big shot in Nanming, it might have a great impact on the war between the Empire of Tang and Nanming. Leave this matter to me. As long as the person is still in Chang'an City, he will not be able to escape. Eunuch Zhao paused, then continued. Isn't Your Majesty curious about who saved His Royal Highness the Crown Prince? According to the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army, when he arrived, the assassins were burned to ashes. Obviously, before he arrived, someone had already made a move. The person who made the move was able to quietly burn all the assassins to ashes. His strength is probably beyond that of an ordinary Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. Even if he is not as good as Eunuch Zhao, he is not far behind. Curious. The Emperor of Tang heard this, shook his head and said lightly, everyone has secrets. My son has grown up. It is normal for him to have his own secrets. Why should I be curious? To read the unedited content, please go to Vinegar Literature and Learning. Chapter 104. After Su Qin and the others returned to the East Palace, they found that the number of Forbidden Army in the East Palace had increased by several times. Obviously, the assassination of the Crown Prince made the Emperor of Tang realize that even in the Imperial Palace, it was not absolutely safe. In addition, Su Qin also noticed that everyone who had experienced the assassination, including the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince's confidants, were temporarily unable to leave the palace. The reason given by the Forbidden Army was that the palace was conducting a strict investigation, and they might encounter assassins if they went out at this time. But Su Qin obviously saw the problem. This time, all the assassins were from the Nanming diplomatic mission. Logically speaking, the reason should have been found, and there was no need to investigate the palace. Because the assassination originated from Nanming, it had nothing to do with the palace. But the Emperor of Tang still gave the order. The only possibility was that he did not want the assassination to spread at this time. It seems that the Emperor of Tang, that old fox, is planning something again. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and in the blink of an eye, he had guessed most of the Emperor of Tang's purpose. However, although Su Qin was aware of these things, he was not interested in them. For Su Qin, all schemes were as fragile as thin paper in the face of absolute strength, unable to withstand a single blow. Instead of focusing on these, it was more convenient to improve his strength. As for the large number of Forbidden Army in the East Palace, everyone was forbidden to enter or leave. Maybe this was useful to others, but how could it stop Su Qin? 2 hours later, Su Qin's figure flashed, easily passing through the heavy guards and quietly leaving the East Palace. Let's sign in at Taiji Palace today. Su Qin's mind moved, and he appeared in front of Taiji Palace. Taiji Palace was the place where the Emperor of Tang and all the civil and military officials discussed politics. Logically speaking, it should have a lot of Dao accumulation. System sign in. Su Qin looked up at the majestic Taiji Palace and said in his heart, congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Received Nine Sutra. Nine Sutra? A smile emerged on Su Qin's face. He had been signing in at the Imperial Palace for almost half a year, and he finally managed to sign in this absolute technique. It was said that the Nine manual was a unique skill created by someone who was in charge of the Imperial Palace in the previous dynasty. It was said that it could condense 9 kinds of forces. In terms of level, the Nine manual was completely above the lunar body refining art. The Tai body refining art could only gather the power of Tai. When cultivated to the limit, one could only gather the power of Tai. However, The Nine Yin Sutra could condense a total of 9 types of yin energy. The difference between them was clear at a glance. Not bad, not bad. If I still can't sign in, I'm prepared to use other ultimate yin techniques instead. Su Qin nodded slightly. In his speculation, the 9 Yin scripture and 9 Yang divine art were the most suitable, but it didn't mean that Su Qin only had the 9 Yin scripture as a choice. After signing in for so many years, Su Qin didn't know how many ultimate yin cultivation techniques he had obtained, and among them, there were some that were comparable to the 9 Yin scripture. Just as Su Qin was thinking, all kinds of information about the 9 Yin scripture poured into Su Qin's mind. After a while, Su Qin opened his eyes, and a satisfied look appeared on his face. After going back, I will start to cultivate the 9 Yin scripture, and then temper my body with the 9 Yang divine art. Let's see if I can achieve the 4th transformation of my body. Su Qin thought silently. From grade 9 to Venerable Arhat, Su Qin's body had transformed 3 times. The first time was when he used Invincible Vajra divine art and Lunar body refining art to enhance his body to the level of a grade 1 great grandmaster. The first time was in the back mountain of the Shaolin Temple, where he strengthened his body with the power of the seal left by Tuarahan. The third time was when Su Qin broke through to the Arhat realm. At the final leap, his body, divine sense, and internal strength all burst forth. Since these 3 transformations, even if Su Qin entered the 3rd heavenly layer, and his strength skyrocketed, he still couldn't achieve the effect of transformation. Now Su Qin is fusing 9 Yang divine art and 9 Yin scripture together to see if he can transform his body like when he was in grade 9. Just as Su Qin was about to return to the East Palace, his expression suddenly changed and he looked at a certain position in the Imperial Palace. 6 grade 1 great grandmasters left the Imperial Palace? Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. When the 6 grade 1 great grandmasters left the Imperial Palace, they tried to conceal their aura, but they could hide it from outsiders, so how could they hide it from Su Qin? Interesting. Is the Emperor of Tang going to make a move? Su Qin guessed in his heart. In the entire Imperial Palace, only the Emperor of Tang can order 6 grade 1 great grandmasters at the same time. Under the strict blockade of the entire Imperial Palace, outsiders can't enter, and the people inside can't go out. For these 6 grade 1 great grandmasters to leave at this time, there is no other possibility other than following the orders of the Emperor of Tang. At the same time, in a mansion in Chang'an City, the white-robed man looked up at the sky and frowned. As the guardian of Nanming's bright gown guard, the white-robed man has a high position and power. If it were not related to a certain plan of the Ming Emperor, it would be impossible for him to come to Chang'an City in person. It must be known that Chang'an City is the capital of the Empire of Tang. Who knows how much of the Empire of Tang's heritage is hidden there? Even if the white-robed man is confident, he is not sure that he will succeed and retreat. But the white-robed man has no choice. If the Ming Emperor asked him to come, then he must come. Even if he dies, he must die in Chang'an City. It should be about time. Why hasn't the news come out yet? The white-robed man only felt a faint palpitating illusion. At this moment, the chubby businessman ran in and respectfully said, "Greetings, Guardian. What the hell is going on?" The white-robed man looked at the chubby businessman and frowned. "Is there a fight in the Imperial Palace? Lord Town Guardian." "I don't know. I haven't received any news yet." The chubby businessman was also very puzzled. "No news." The white-robed man frowned. "Did the Crown Prince leave the Black Tortoise Gate?" When the chubby businessman heard this, he immediately replied, "No." When these words came out, the white-robed man's expression changed slightly. It shouldn't be. According to previous intelligence, the Crown Prince will accompany the Crown Princess back to the family Su at this time of year. The white-robed man muttered to himself. Maybe he was delayed by something? The chubby businessman couldn't help but guess. No. The more the white-robed man thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. There was no delay in the past years, but this year it was delayed? If the assassination had really started, the Imperial Palace wouldn't be so peaceful, unless someone deliberately concealed the news and delayed the time. The white-robed man's mind raced, and finally his face turned pale. Not good. There's a change. The white-robed man immediately got up and prepared to leave Chang'an City. However, the white-robed man hadn't gone far. Then he felt 6 terrifying auras appear and envelop him from all directions, sealing off all corners of the mansion. I was wondering who it was. So it's those mad dogs of the Imperial Secret Guards. The gate of the mansion was pushed open, and a feminine eunuch in a red eunuch uniform slowly walked in. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Studies. Chapter 105. Red-Clothed Eunuch? The white-robed man's expression was extremely ugly. In the Emperor of Tang's palace, the eunuchs who can wear red official robes are basically grade 1 great grandmasters. Of course there are exceptions. For example, although eunuch Hong next to imperial concubine Li is grade 2, he was still given a red official robe. But such examples are relatively rare. And at this time, the white-robed man could feel that the 6 auras that enveloped the entire mansion were all grade 1 great grandmasters. I didn't expect it to be the guardian of the genie guard. The red-clothed eunuch immediately recognized the white-robed man's identity. Although the Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard was feared by the other countries, it wasn't as if the other countries didn't put up any resistance. Especially the Tang Empire, which had investigated the upper echelons of the embroidered uniform guard thoroughly. The Emperor of Tang has good means. The white-robed man smiled, and his expression suddenly calmed down. You want to break your heart and commit suicide? The red-clothed eunuch who walked in smiled disdainfully, took a step forward, and appeared beside the white-robed man, and then gently pressed his 5 fingers. Wang! The white-robed man only felt his vision begin to blur, and his heart that was about to break began to slowly recover. You! Before the white-robed man could speak, he fell into a coma. East Palace. In the right spring square, Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the true essence in his body slowly circulated according to the 9 Yin Taoist scripture, condensing the extreme Yin force. After a long time, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. In an instant, with Su Qin as the center, the temperature within a radius of tens of meters dropped rapidly, as if he had instantly arrived at the Arctic ice field. Huh! Su Qin frowned. Suddenly, the originally falling temperature continued to rise, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to normal. This 9 Yin Taoist scripture is a bit interesting. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he thought silently in his heart. Compared to the 9 Yang Divine Art, the 9 Yin Sutra was even more bizarre. It was the complete opposite of the 9 Yang Divine Art. However, isn't this what I want? A smile emerged on Su Qin's face. With his current body that had undergone 3 transformations, ordinary yin and yang energy was completely useless. It couldn't even affect Su Qin's body, let alone improve it. In 2 days at most, I will be able to cultivate the 9 Yin Sutra to the great accomplishment stage and gather the 9 types of yin energy, Su Qin calculated in his mind. If an ordinary cultivator wanted to cultivate the 9 Yin true scripture to the Deshang realm, they would not be able to do so without dozens of years or even hundreds of years. Moreover, this was based on the premise that the cultivator's aptitude was innately compatible with the 9 Yin true scripture. But Su Qin was different. As the venerable arhat of the third heaven, he had a commanding position. Coupled with the system's instilling of all the essences of the 9 Yin Sutra, even 2 days felt long to Su Qin. The next day, Su Qin arrived at Chung'an Hall. Third brother, you're here. Crown Prince Li Sheng walked over with a face full of joy. After Yun Yang drank the medicine prescribed by third brother, her body has obviously improved. Even the imperial physician by father's side found it unbelievable. Crown Prince Li Sheng looked at Su Qin with eyes full of gratitude. Is that so? Su Qin did not feel much. Helping his little sister Su Yueyun to get rid of the yin qi was as easy as lifting a finger. It was not a big deal at all. That's right. Do you still remember the assassination yesterday? Crown Prince Li Sheng suddenly thought of something. He looked around and whispered. What's wrong? Su Qin asked casually. When I went to see father in the morning, I felt that father seemed to be in a good mood. It should have something to do with the assassination of the Nanming diplomatic mission yesterday. Crown Prince Li Sheng told him his guess. Although the Emperor of Tang did not tell him clearly at that time, he did give him a few reminders. I see. Su Qin nodded slightly. It seems that the 6th grade 1 great grandmasters who left the imperial palace yesterday caught a big fish. Otherwise, according to the Emperor of Tang's temperament, if he did not really have a big harvest, he would not behave like this. Next, Su Qin chatted with Crown Prince Li Shang for a while. In fact, it was mainly Crown Prince Li Shang who was talking, and Su Qin just listened casually. And Crown Prince Li Shang mostly talked about the imperial court, such as which minister came forward to impeach him, obviously. Although the Emperor of Tang was persistent and he successfully sat on the position of Crown Prince, it was obvious that this position was not very stable and had even been questioned by many. If you become the emperor in the future, what do you want to do? Su Qin listened for a while and asked casually. Although Li Shang carried nearly 1/10 of the Empire of Tang's destiny, as long as he does not die, the future throne will basically be Li Shang's. But Su Qin also wants to know what Li Shang plans for the future. Third brother, you must not say this kind of thing outside in the future. Father Emperor's health has just improved, Crown Prince Li Shang said quickly. Su Qin heard this and shook his head slightly. Su Qin is very clear about the Emperor of Tang's health. If it weren't for a peak grade 1 great grandmaster who was willing to exchange his life for his life, he would have died long ago. But even so, the Emperor of Tang will not live for long. Even Venerable Arhat has a Shoyuan limit, let alone an emperor. The improvement in Crown Prince Li Shang's eyes was nothing more than a momentary recovery. Half an hour later, Su Qin returned to the right spring square again. It's almost time. Strive to cultivate the 9 Taoist scripture to great accomplishment, and then complete the 4th transformation of the body in one go. Su Qin sat cross-legged, slowly closed his eyes, and began to cultivate. At the same time, Nanming's capital. Inside the imperial palace, Ming Emperor sat high on the dragon throne, looking at the intelligence in his hand. The assassination failed? Ming Emperor whispered to himself. His voice did not fluctuate, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Reporting to Your Majesty. In addition to the failure of the mission, the stronghold of the brocade-gowned guards in Chang, and as well as the town governor, have all lost contact. The commander of the brocade-gowned guards, wearing a flying suit, said with cold sweat on his head. Oh, not only did the assassination fail, even the people were captured alive. Ming Emperor put down the intelligence in his hand, looked at the commander, and said lightly, Your Majesty, please forgive me. I deserve to die. The commander of the brocade-gowned guards knelt on the ground with a thud and said in a trembling voice. In Nanming, the name brocade-gowned guards was like a ghost. Many people were in awe and fear. Even the princes and ministers in the imperial court were afraid of the brocade-gowned guards. But only the commander himself knew that the so-called brocade-gowned guards was just a dog under Ming Emperor. If this dog was useful, Ming Emperor would not be stingy with rewards. But if it was useless, he would change it for another dog. Perhaps the brocade-gowned guard still existed, but no one knew whether he was the commander or not. I will go to Chang, and personally and prepare for the assassination. The commander of the brocade-gowned guards touched the ground with his forehead and said quickly, No need. After a long time, Ming Emperor's voice slowly came. Since the first assassination failed, there is no need to try again. Ming Emperor paused for a while and continued, I remember that some time ago, a prince of the Empire of Tang wanted to contact me and cooperate with me? To read the unmodified content, please go to vinegar/literature. Chapter 106. As soon as Ming Emperor finished his words, the commander of the brocade guards, who was kneeling on the ground, immediately replied, Your Majesty, there is such a thing. At that time, the Emperor of Tang had just appointed the crown prince. This prince was not reconciled, so he contacted Nanming and wanted to use the power of Nanming to ascend to the throne. The commander of the brocade guards said, Now you reply to him. Ming Emperor leaned slightly on the dragon throne and said calmly, I agree. As soon as these words came out, the commander of the brocade guard's expression changed. Helping the Emperor of Tang's prince ascend to the throne was not in Nanming's interest. For Nanming, the more chaotic the Empire of Tang was, the better. If a new emperor ascended to the throne and unified all forces, it would be a disaster rather than a blessing. I know what you are thinking. Ming Emperor glanced at the commander of the brocade guards and said softly, I only agreed to let him ascend to the throne, but no one can guarantee how long he can sit on the throne. As you wish. I will contact him right away. The commander of the brocade guards' heart skipped a beat and said hurriedly. When the commander of the brocade guards completely left, Ming Emperor, who was sitting high on the dragon throne, slowly stood up and walked out of the hall. The Empire of Tang, haha. The Emperor of Tang's palace. Right spring square of the East Palace. Su Qin sat cross-legged. His aura flowed, but it did not leak out at all. After a while, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. It's finally done. Su Qin raised his left hand. 9 wisps of extreme force were constantly circling and colliding between his fingers, emitting waves of palpitating waves. When the 9 manual is fully cultivated, I can turn the surrounding dozens of meters into an extremely cold ice domain, with the raise of my hand to restrict and suppress the enemy. It's quite interesting. Su Qin sensed it carefully and nodded slightly. Compared with the extreme yang of the 9 yang divine skill, which could burn and burn everything, the 9 manual was more like a spring breeze and drizzle, silently moistening things. Oftentimes, the enemy would be corroded by the power of the 9 before they even knew what was happening. But no matter if it's 9 or 9 yang, they're all just means to me. What's truly important is the tempering of the body by the supreme yang energy and the supreme yin energy. Su Qin's eyes lit up. Now that both the 9 yin divine technique and the 9 yang divine technique had been completed, it was time to prepare for the transformation of his physical body. Let's leave the palace first and find a random place to talk. Su Qin sat cross-legged, his thoughts fluctuating. Thinking of this, Su Qin restrained his aura and stepped out of the imperial palace in Chang'an City. This place is not bad. Su Qin found a valley more than 20 miles away from Chang'an City. This valley was surrounded by beautiful mountains and clear waters. Vaguely, it was the place where the yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered. Here it is. Su Qin floated into the valley. Let's set up a heaven and earth formation first to prevent anyone from disturbing us. Su Qin's mind moved, and a hidden heaven and earth formation enveloped the entire valley. With Su Qin's strength, even during the breakthrough period, no foreign objects could disturb him. But it was better to be as quiet as possible. Anyway, Su Qin still had dozens of such heaven and earth formations. If he wanted to set them up, he could do it with a thought. It was not troublesome at all. After setting up the heaven and earth formation, Su Qin found a random place in the valley and sat cross-legged. Although there are no martial arts legends on this continent, there are martial arts legends outside the continent and in the endless deep sea. Su Qin thought silently. He was not in a hurry to start. Instead, he adjusted his state and tried to achieve the transformation of his physical body in one go. For example, the founder of the Empire of Tang, and the ancestors of other countries, were more or less related to the existence of martial arts legends. These martial arts legends cross the sea in search of longevity. They might come back at any time. If I don't have enough strength to deal with them by then, I'm afraid I'll be at a disadvantage. Su Qin suddenly felt a sense of urgency. Let's begin. Su Qin raised his hands. 9 wisps of supreme yang energy wrapped around the 5 fingers of his right hand, and 9 wisps of supreme yin energy wrapped around the 5 fingers of his left hand. If he wanted yin and yang to coexist and reach the level of tempering his physical body, he had to use the eye of truth to observe his own body. This was also the reason why no martial artist in this world was like Su Qin, who strengthened his body with the power of supreme yang and supreme yin. It was not that they did not want to, but they did not dare. Although the powers of yin and yang coexisted, they also restrained each other at the same time. Once they coexisted in the body, if there was any carelessness, the balance between the two would be broken, and the result would be extremely tragic. Only Su Qin could observe everything in his body with the eye of truth at all times and maintain the balance of yin and yang. So he was not afraid of this. Otherwise, if it were any other martial artist, even a martial arts legend, they would have a headache and even be seriously injured if they were not careful. Buzz! Just as Su Qin slowly urged, the 9 wisps of supreme yang and supreme yin energy between his 10 fingers began to spread and spread at a moderate pace. Su Qin only felt his body go numb and limp, as if he had been struck by lightning and sunk deep into a sea of thunder. At this moment, if anyone was here, they would be shocked to find that Su Qin's body was full of two completely opposite forces. These two forces constantly collided and slowly merged, and finally gave birth to a trace of inexplicable aura that constantly merged into Su Qin's body. As expected, the power of yin and yang still has a miraculous effect on the body. Su Qin felt the gradual improvement of his physical body and was overjoyed. This degree of improvement almost made Su Qin think that he had returned to the time when he advanced by leaps and bounds. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 2 hours had passed. At this moment, the aura on Su Qin's body gradually calmed down. It's about time. If I continue, I'm afraid my body will be damaged. Su Qin knew the principle of gradual improvement and immediately stopped cultivating. I'll come back tomorrow. Su Qin breathed a sigh of relief and got up to return to the East Palace's right spring square. In the following time, in addition to signing in every day, Su Qin would take 2 hours to temper his body here. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days until a month later. In the valley, Su Qin sat cross-legged, and wisps of extreme yin and extreme yang forces constantly collided and lingered in his body, and finally slowly merged, giving birth to a new inexplicable aura that seeped into Su Qin's body. I've reached my limit. Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, and his thoughts fluctuated. In fact, as early as 10 days ago, Su Qin had already felt that the transformation of his body had begun to slow down, but until today this transformation had completely stopped. Although Su Qin felt that it was a pity, he had already expected this. Now how strong is my body? Su Qin stretched out his right hand and exerted a little force. Suddenly, a faint golden color flashed on the surface of his skin. This faint golden color was not the same bronze color as the invincible Vajra divine art. It was more like the golden color of the Buddha golden body in the depths of Su Qin's eyebrows. Golden body? So my current physical body already has some of the power of the golden body? Su Qin inexplicably exclaimed in his heart. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Literature Learning. Chapter 107. Outside Chang'an City. In a valley somewhere, Su Qin sat cross-legged, carefully feeling the difference between his body and before the transformation. My strength has increased by at least 2 to 3 times. A smile appeared on Su Qin's face. He was very satisfied. He now had a feeling that without the help of true essence and divine will, he could punch through a small hill with just the strength of his body. It was incredible. One had to know that at his level, even the slightest increase in strength was extremely difficult, let alone increasing it explosively by several times. Many venerable Arhat martial arts legends were stuck in the same place for decades, unable to make any progress. Su Qin, who had entered the venerable Arhat realm for less than 10 years, had already stepped into the third heaven and transformed his body 4 times. It was unprecedented, at least not on this continent. In addition to strength, my defense has also improved greatly. Su Qin raised his left hand, pulled up his sleeve, and revealed his slender arm. Then he casually swung his right hand, and a subtle sword light flashed and fell silently on his left arm. The power of this subtle sword light was completely restrained. If it was in the outside world, it could easily cut down a section of the city wall and destroy the city. But at this moment, when it landed on Su Qin's slender arm, it only left a barely visible white mark. And after this white mark appeared, it disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, it was restored to its original state. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly. According to Su Qin's guess, his body at this moment was enough to block the attack of a martial artist who had just entered the martial arts legend realm. In other words, even if Su Qin stood there motionless and let a first heaven legend attack him, it would be like a breeze blowing on his face. He would not care at all. Most importantly, through this transformation, a trace of the metal element has been born. Su Qin's eyes turned slightly and fell on his arm again. He saw faint traces of gold flowing on the surface of his skin. The metal element was immortal. Regardless of whether it was the Buddhist golden body or the Taoist Dharma body, when cultivated to the extreme, they were all related to the metal attribute. The trace of metal element in Su Qin's body was enough to prove that Su Qin was on the right path, and that he was searching in the right direction. Unfortunately, these strands of gold attribute are too little. If I want to attain the level of that golden Buddha in my ancestral aperture, then I have to transform at least 100 times before there's hope? Su Qin rubbed his forehead and sighed. However, although Su Qin felt a little regretful, he was not depressed. He had enough time now. With a lifespan of 1,000 years, even if he improved a little every 10 years, it was more than enough. My current fighting ability should be comparable to a martial arts legend of the fourth heaven, right? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as his eyes lit up. Realms were realms. Killing was killing. Some martial artists were good at attacking. They were often able to defeat those who were stronger than them and fight those who were stronger than them. Of course, if the difference in realms is very big, such as a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster fighting against a Grade 3 martial artist, even if the Grade 3 martial artist is good at attacking, the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster can easily suppress him. Throughout the world, there are very few martial artists who can defeat those who are stronger than them. Not even 1 in a million people can do it. Every one of them is blessed by luck, and will have extraordinary achievements in the future. Now that the transformation of my body is complete, it's time to prepare for the breakthrough to the fourth heavenly layer. Su Qin's eyes narrowed as he made a decision in his heart. Originally, he was already at peak third heavenly layer. The reason why he delayed until now was nothing more than waiting for his body to transform. Now that he has done it, he naturally has to prepare for the breakthrough. At the same time, outside the Imperial Palace, inside the Chan Palace, Prince Sun, who was wearing a brocade robe, had a gloomy face. Imperial Father has already begun to beat me. Prince Sun's face was extremely ugly. Some time ago, Prince Sun discovered that some of the ministers who supported him were transferred away one after another. They were either far away from the imperial court or sent to remote areas. If it was 1 or 2 of them, it may be a coincidence, but with more than a dozen of them in a row, if Prince Sun still can't react, he would be really stupid. Why? Why does Imperial Father like that bastard? Prince Sun's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was full of unwillingness. Even if the Emperor of Tang is in old age, he is still the Emperor and the master of the Empire of Tang. If he wants to suppress a prince, it's just a matter of a thought. Prince Sun even guessed that if it weren't for the Emperor of Tang still holding a trace of father-son affection, he would have been transferred to a remote corner to be an idle prince. At this moment, a middle-aged counselor hurried over. Your Highness! Your Highness! The counselor walked not far from Prince Sun and quickly said, There is news from Nanming. Nanming? Prince Sun's spirit shook. All of you can leave now. Prince Sun glanced at the maids on both sides and lightly said, Yes. Suddenly, only Prince Sun and the middle-aged counselor were left in the hall. What did Nanming say? Prince Sun took a deep breath and stared at the counselor. Your Highness! Ming Emperor has agreed to support Your Highness to sit on the throne. The middle-aged counselor carefully said. Oh! Prince Sun's face lit up. What he was most worried about was that Nanming would look down on him as a prince. But now that Ming Emperor has agreed, it's clear that he is ready to bet on him. What are the conditions? Prince Sun calmed himself down and asked. As the Prince of the Empire of Tang, Prince Sun naturally knows that there is no such thing as a free price in this world. Even relatives can scheme against each other, let alone between 2 countries. Ming Emperor said that after Your Highness ascends to the throne, he needs to send 800,000 sets of armor to Nanming and borrow the Northern Song dynasty. The middle-aged counselor bowed and said, 800,000 sets of armor? Prince Sun's face changed. The Empire of Tang's armor is world-famous. Together with the Mengyuan Empire's cavalry, they are known as the 2 major weapons of war. Nanming has been coveting them for who knows how long. Unfortunately, only the Empire of Tang knows about the craftsmanship of the armor. Even if Nanming gets some armor from the battlefield, it's useless. Prince Sun expected Nanming to want the armor, but he didn't expect the other party to ask for such an exorbitant price. As for borrowing the Northern Song dynasty, it doesn't matter. Tell Ming Emperor. I agree. Prince Sun gritted his teeth and said after thinking for a long time. As long as he can ascend to the throne, let alone 800,000 sets of armor, even if the price is higher, Prince Sun can only agree. Because he has no choice. Since he chose the path of fighting for the throne, only by living can he have everything. Your Highness. The middle-aged counselor hesitated and said, Ming Emperor's means are unfathomable. Your Highness must be careful. The middle-aged counselor couldn't help but say, I naturally know. Prince Sun slowly got up and paced back and forth a few steps. Okay. You can go now. During this time, don't make any moves. Prince Sun sat back down and looked at the middle-aged counselor and said in a deep voice, Yes. Go to vinegar #lu #air #1 #shue. Chapter 108. Imperial Palace. When Su Qin returned here, he didn't return to the right spring square immediately. Instead, he went to the crop altar. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Received innate spirit liquid. A cold mechanical voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. Innate spirit liquid? Not bad, not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly. In terms of effectiveness, the innate spirit liquid is definitely the most suitable treasure for Su Qin at this stage. Soon, Su Qin returned to the Right Spring Square. The Right Spring Square was a residence that Crown Prince Li Shang specially gave to Su Qin. It was larger than the Su Mansion, and the environment inside was also good. Su Qin lived comfortably there. In the afternoon, Su Yueyun asked the maid to invite Su Qin to Chang'an Hall. Since the assassination attempt on the Imperial Palace, Su Yueyun has been staying in the East Palace and can't go anywhere. Fortunately, Su Qin was there and they could chat occasionally. When Su Qin arrived at Chang'an Hall, not long after, the Emperor of Tang also came over. No need to salute. Here, I am not the Emperor. The Emperor of Tang waved his hand and said indifferently. Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun looked at each other, and could only bite the bullet and sit at the same table as the Emperor of Tang. After they ate for a while, the Emperor of Tang suddenly glanced at Su Qin and asked casually, How long has little brother family Su been in Chang'an? Less than a year. Su Qin didn't even raise his eyes and replied casually. Perhaps for others, the Emperor of Tang is a high and mighty emperor, who controls the life and death of hundreds of millions of people in the Empire of Tang. But in Su Qin's eyes, the Emperor of Tang is just an old man who is about to die. Less than a year. The Emperor of Tang nodded slightly, as if he had thought of something. Suddenly, he changed the topic and asked, I heard that Yun Er's body was cured by family Su? Such medical skills, I truly admire you. The Emperor of Tang sighed with emotion. Others might not know about Su Yueyun's recovery, but how could it be hidden from the Emperor of Tang? After the Emperor of Tang finished speaking, his eyes fell on Su Qin. He was actually quite curious about Su Qin, not only because Su Qin dared to say that he would not live long, but also because Su Qin always exuded an aloof temperament. One had to know that any man at Su Qin's age would want nothing more than to make a name for himself. But Su Qin was different. At least, the Emperor of Tang did not see any desire for power or wealth in Su Qin. And according to the Emperor of Tang's understanding, there were only two kinds of people in the world who had such a mentality. One was the kind of great saint and great sage who had truly seen through the world. The other was a brat who had never experienced the benefits of power. Do you want to ask me about my body? Su Qin did not want to waste time with the Emperor of Tang, and asked directly. I do have that thought. The Emperor of Tang's expression did not change as he admitted it. Ever since he knew that Su Yueyun was cured by Su Qin, he had this thought. One had to know that Su Yueyun's body was something that countless imperial doctors could do nothing about. Even the old imperial doctor by the Emperor of Tang's side could not do anything. But in the end it was cured by Su Qin? I've already said it last time. You don't have long to live, just wait for your death. Su Qin looked at the Emperor of Tang again and shook his head. The Emperor of Tang's body was not seriously injured, but his origin was seriously damaged. Coupled with the fact that Shoyuan's great limit was approaching, he was basically dead. If it was just a loss of origin, Su Qin would have a solution, but Shoyuan's great limit is the law of heaven and earth, just like the rising of the sun and the setting of the moon. There is no other way except to become a grade 1 great grandmaster and extend Shoyuan's lifespan. Su Qin's words made Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun's faces turn white again. This time Su Qin not only repeated, you don't have long to live, but also added the words just wait for your death. Ha ha ha. Little brother family Su is really interesting. When the Emperor of Tang heard Su Qin's words, not only was he not angry, he even laughed. If it was decades ago, the Emperor of Tang might have been angry when he heard Su Qin's words, but now, his body is constantly damaged, and he has long looked down on life and death. Over the years, the Emperor of Tang was tired of listening to flattery, but now listening to Su Qin's truth, he had a very special feeling. It was as if at this moment, he was no longer the Emperor of the Empire of Tang, but an ordinary old man. In fact, you don't have to think so much. Even a legend can only live for hundreds of years as Shouyuan, Su Qin said sincerely. For example, he only has 970 years left as Shouyuan. Although he can live dozens of times longer than ordinary people, he will still die of old age. Martial arts legend, the Emperor of Tang was slightly stunned, and then smiled again. Little brother family Su, with your ability it's a bit unfair to stay here all day. Why don't you join the Imperial Hospital and chat with me? After the Emperor of Tang finished laughing, he asked casually. As soon as he said this, Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yuyan's eyes suddenly lit up. The Emperor of Tang's words obviously meant to promote Su Qin. The Imperial Hospital in the palace was independent of any institution in the palace. It only listened to the orders of the Emperor of Tang. Although it seemed to have no power, it actually had a very high status. No need. Su Qin directly refused. Okay. The Emperor of Tang did not force Su Qin. After a few more words he got up and left. After the Emperor of Tang had completely walked out, Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yuyan hurried to Su Qin. Third brother, you're really... Crown Prince Li Shang did not know what to say. Su Qin and the Emperor of Tang spoke in such a tone. If it were anyone else, they would have been dragged out and beheaded hundreds of times. But Su Qin was completely fine, and the Emperor of Tang valued him very much. Not long after the Emperor of Tang left, Su Qin was also ready to go back. A moment later, Su Qin returned to the right spring square. This is also my temporary residence. Why don't I set up a heaven and earth formation so that I don't know when someone comes by when I'm not here? Su Qin sat cross-legged and fell into deep thought. After signing in at the Shaolin Temple for almost 30 years, Su Qin had obtained dozens of heaven and earth formations. These formations had different uses and were biased towards different aspects. Now Su Qin only needed to choose one of these dozens of formations. Which heaven and earth formation should I choose? Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. The essence gathering Holy Land formation, no need. This formation is mainly used to gather essence chi of heaven and earth. It's too noisy and I don't need it. The demon subduing formation, no, this formation's evil chi is too strong. Although it won't affect me, I'll get tired of it after a long time. The Sumeru Meson formation, this formation's requirements for materials are too high. I can't get them in a short time. One by one, the heaven and earth formations flashed through Su Qin's mind. Finally, he decided on a certain formation. The 5 elements chaos formation. Creatures under Arhat will be confused after entering, and time and space will be reversed. Requires 120 jade stones. Please go to vinegar #lu #air #1 #shue. Chapter 109. You're the One. 5 elements reversal array. Su Qin made a decision in his heart. This heaven and earth array completely met Su Qin's needs. Under the cover of the array, even if outsiders entered the right spring square, they would completely lose their sense of direction and would only go around in place. And Su Qin, as the owner of the array, would also know immediately if someone broke into the array. Moreover, the 5 elements reversal array didn't require many jade stones, only 120 pieces, and it was also very simple to set up. With Su Qin's strength, it was enough to complete in a few seconds. Just as Su Qin was signing in and cultivating, the imperial court was in turmoil. The Emperor of Tang knew that his end was near and had begun to pave the way for Crown Prince Li Shang. In fact, the Emperor of Tang had been doing this for decades, but in the past it was mostly done step by step and it was difficult for outsiders to notice. But now the Emperor of Tang didn't intend to hide it, or it could be said that it couldn't be hidden at all. If he wanted the Crown Prince to smoothly ascend the throne and sit firmly on it, some people must be completely cleaned up. For several days, A large number of civil officials and military generals were imprisoned on various charges every day. These civil officials and military generals were basically completely on the side of a certain prince. If it was before, the Emperor of Tang wouldn't be so ruthless. For these officials who had already taken sides at most, he would transfer them away and exile them. But now the Emperor of Tang knew that his time was running out. In addition, he had been in charge of the imperial court for decades, and no one dared to disobey the imperial edict. It was only at this moment that everyone realized that the old emperor sitting on the throne was actually so ruthless in his methods. Suddenly, the entire Chang and city was turbulent, and the civil and military officials in the imperial court were even more terrified, fearing that they would be within the scope of the Emperor of Tang's purge. And Su Qin also heard about all this. He often strolled around the imperial palace and occasionally heard the palace maids and eunuchs chatting about which fourth-rank official was imprisoned today, and which third-rank official would return to his hometown tomorrow. There were no secrets hidden in the imperial palace, not to mention a major event that alarmed the entire court. After Su Qin found out about this, he was too lazy to care about it. The Emperor of Tang did all this for the sake of Crown Prince Li Shang. There was no conflict with Su Qin. He just needed to watch quietly. Half a month later, in the imperial court, the Emperor of Tang personally called the princes over. In front of the court officials, the Emperor of Tang asked the princes if they wanted to live in a prosperous and stable fief outside Chang and city. As soon as he said this, the princes' faces all turned pale. The Emperor of Tang's words were clearly intended to send them outside so that Crown Prince Li Shang could smoothly ascend the throne. The other officials looked at the princes sympathetically. After half a month of purges, most of the officials in the imperial court had been replaced. The remaining officials who had not been replaced were either very capable and had never taken sides, or had always listened to the Emperor of Tang's orders. "Father, you can't be so heartless." A prince suddenly knelt on the ground and looked at the Emperor of Tang with red eyes. "I'm also your son. My mother is the empress. By right, the position of crown prince should be mine." Tears streamed down the prince's face. Among the princes, the one with the greatest chance of inheriting the throne was none other than him. But unfortunately, since Crown Prince Li Shang came to Chang'an, everything changed. Not only did he lose his power, but even the empress was directly imprisoned in the cold palace. "The empress?" The Emperor of Tang sneered. "Take him away and send him to his fief. Without my order, he is not allowed to step into Chang'an." "As you wish." Immediately, the Forbidden Army came in and dragged the princes out. Seeing this scene, the remaining princes immediately realized that they couldn't do anything about it. They could only helplessly leave Chang and head to their fief. Seeing this scene, Prince Sun's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He could see the Emperor of Tang's determination. At this time, no matter what he said, it would be impossible to change the Emperor of Tang's mind. After this meeting, everyone knew that the prince's power was gone. Crown Prince Li Shang was the future the Emperor of Tang. As for the Emperor of Tang, after personally sending away the princes, his body became much weaker. Most of the time, he was lying on the dragon bed with eunuch Zhao accompanying him. As for state affairs, it was up to Crown Prince Li Shang to discuss with the officials. Fortunately, Crown Prince Li Shang often came into contact with these matters in the past few years. The Emperor of Tang also deliberately cultivated this aspect, so there wasn't much of a mess. During this period, Su Yueyun often complained to Su Qin that Crown Prince Li Shang saw him a lot less. However, Su Yueyun knew what to do. He understood that Crown Prince Li Shang was facing a major event in the Empire of Tang. If he didn't handle it carefully, it would cause turmoil in the Empire of Tang and cause countless people to suffer. "Third brother, let's go home today. I haven't seen Dad in a long time." Su Yueyun found Su Qin and said, "Okay." Su Qin nodded. It just so happens that he has nothing to do now. Today's sign and opportunity has also been used. Going back to the family, Su won't delay anything. Soon, the two returned to the Su mansion under the escort of the Forbidden Army. Since the last assassination in the Imperial Palace, Crown Prince Li Shang and Su Yueyun would be accompanied by the Forbidden Army whenever they went out, not giving any chance for assassins to assassinate them. "Yuner, you're back?" When Su Shimin saw Su Yueyun and Su Qin, he immediately ordered the servants to go out and prepare. Dad, where are big brother and second brother? Su Yueyun returned to the Su mansion in a much better mood and casually asked. The two of them. Su Shimin shook his head. There have been too many changes in the army recently. Qing Hao and Qing Yu are very busy. I see. Su Yueyun nodded. The Emperor of Tang has been cleaning up the imperial court for half a month. Who knows how many civil and military officials have been replaced. Naturally, the army was also deeply affected. Don't worry, I've already sent someone to inform the two of them. They should be back by now. Su Shimin opened his mouth and said. The army that Su Sungho and Su Qingyu were in was in Chang'an City, very close to the Su mansion. Just as Su Shimin was speaking. Dad, little sister is back? Su Sungho and Su Chengyu strode into the Su mansion. What's wrong with being so casual? Yuner is now the crown princess, you should be careful. Su Shimin frowned. As soon as he said this, Su Sungho and Su Qingyu immediately shrunk their heads. All right, Dad, we're all family. Su Yueyun didn't mind and said with a smile. Just as they were talking and laughing, Su Qin narrowed his eyes and looked at a jade pendant on Su Sungho's body. This jade pendant was crystal clear and was obviously a priceless item. Su Sungho hung it on his body, probably to show off. However, in Su Qin's eyes, the surface of the jade pendant was faintly covered in black gas. This black gas kept spreading and condensing, emitting a gloomy and evil aura. This is Nanzhao's witchcraft? Su Qin frowned slightly, his thoughts fluctuating. Please go to vinegar #lu #air #1 #shui. Chapter 110. Although martial arts were the mainstream in this world, other than martial arts, there were also traces of the existence of other extraordinary powers. For example, witchcraft and curses. Most of the witchcraft and curses came from Nanzhao. Nanzhao was located in the southwest, and there were many undeveloped areas. It was ruled by a sect called moon worship. Even the king of Nanzhao was a disciple of moon worship. The leader of moon worship was a master of witchcraft and curses. He was extremely powerful. There was once a grade 1 great grandmaster who didn't believe it and wanted to sneak into moon worship, but he was scared away by an inexplicable aura. Witchcraft and curses were unpredictable, and often killed people without leaving a trace. However, witchcraft and curses had a fatal flaw, which was that they were controlled by qi and blood. People with strong qi and blood could almost ignore most witchcraft and curses. Martial artists, on the other hand, had a strong qi and blood, which was the nemesis of all witchcraft and curses. This was also the reason why the moon worship was holed up in Nanzhao. Su Qin didn't expect to see traces of witchcraft in Chang'an City. Su Sungho noticed Su Qin's gaze and immediately picked up the jade and said, Little Qin, have you also noticed the extraordinary thing about this jade pendant? It's strange. When I went out this morning, this jade pendant happened to fall at my feet. At this point, Su Chenghao said proudly, It seems that when one's luck is good, it's unstoppable. According to my judgment, this jade pendant is worth at least 1,000 taels of silver. Su Sungho said. The value of silver in the Empire of Tang was very high. Usually, a normal family of 4 would only spend a few taels of silver a year. 1,000 taels of silver was enough for a person to buy a house in Chang'an City and live the life of a rich man. Even for today's family Su, 1,000 taels of silver was not a small amount. Su Yueyun glanced at the jade pendant in Su Sungho's hand and nodded. Indeed, the material of this jade pendant is very good. Can be said to be rare. What kind of treasures had she not seen in the palace? When he first saw the jade pendant, he was sure that it was valuable. Picked it up? A cold look appeared on Su Qin's face. He was almost certain that someone was targeting Su Sungho. Not to mention the value of this jade pendant, just the witchcraft curse on it was not something an ordinary person could do. Su Sungho's picked up was probably just his own wishful thinking. There's something wrong with this jade pendant. Su Qin said directly without any hidden dangers. Is there a problem? Su Sungho was shocked. When he picked up the jade pendant, he also had doubts in his heart. However, at that time he subconsciously felt that he was lucky and didn't think too much about it. At this moment, when he heard Su Qin's words, his face suddenly became serious. Little Qin, take another look. Su Sung-ho immediately took off the jade pendant and handed it to Su Qin. Su Qin took the jade pendant and looked at it carefully. Regarding the witchcraft curse, he had only seen a few descriptions in the Sutra Pavilion of the Shaolin Temple. As for the real witchcraft curse, it was the first time that he had seen it. Su Qin gently stroked the jade pendant, opened the eyes of truth, and slowly poured his divine sense into the jade pendant. In an instant, a delicate woman with a thin veil appeared in Su Qin's mind. She should be the real owner of the jade pendant. Was the witchcraft curse also placed on it by her? Su Qin's thoughts were fluctuating. Su Sung-ho obviously didn't get this jade pendant by coincidence. It was intentional. The witchcraft curse on the jade pendant was not a direct curse, but a faint sense of control. Someone wanted to use this jade pendant to control Su Sung-ho. Ever since Su Qin came to Chang, and even if he lived in the East Palace, he would use his divine sense to scan the family Su every once in a while. Therefore, even if Su Qin didn't come back today, he would find out about the abnormality of this jade pendant by tomorrow at the latest. No matter what the result was, Su Sung-ho would not be controlled. But no matter what, someone had made a move on the family Su. Su Qin opened the eyes of truth and locked onto the chi left by the delicate veil woman deep in the jade pendant. The next moment, Su Qin walked out of the Su mansion, raised his head slightly, and looked at the entire Chang'an city. He saw countless chi permeating the air, far and near, strong and weak. Finally, Su Qin looked at the corner of the east side of Chang and city through the eyes of truth. Got you. Su Qin's expression was calm. He raised his right hand, held his fingers like a sword, and gently slashed down. Buzz! An invisible sword essence flashed and disappeared. At the same time, in a room of an inn in Chang'an City, an exotic woman with a thin veil on her face sat quietly on the bed. Saintess. The jade pendant was sent out this morning. Su Sung-ho of the family Su is now carrying it as a treasure. A white-haired old woman walked into the room, stopped not far from the veiled woman, and whispered, "Got it." The veiled woman said softly, "Saintess." The white-haired old woman hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but ask, "Heart control curse is a secret technique of our holy church, and it requires 30% of blood essence to release. It's almost impossible for martial artists below the upper realm to resist its invasion. Is it worth it to use it on Su Sung-ho of the family Su?" The white-haired old woman whispered. In her opinion, Su Sung-ho was just a 7th-grade martial artist, not even in the middle realm. There was no need to use the heart control curse. "It's worth it." The veiled woman glanced at the white-haired old woman. Family Su is the family of the current crown princess. As long as our holy church controls the family Su, it is equivalent to planting a nail in the empire of Tang. At that time, the great cause of our holy church will really take root in the Central Plains. When the veiled woman said this, a trace of fanaticism appeared in her eyes. After that, what should we do with the family Su? The white-haired old woman thought for a while and asked. After that? A smile appeared on the veiled woman's face. After that, Su Sung-ho and the entire family Su will be sacrificed to the moon god. Moon worship worships the moon and believes that the moon god lives on the moon. Every once in a while, they must sacrifice creatures to the moon god. Yes. The white-haired old woman bowed. "Come out with me." The veiled woman slowly got up and was about to walk out of the inn. Suddenly, at this moment, the veiled woman's body stiffened. She could clearly feel that the life origin goo in her body was frantically warning, as if she was facing some kind of life and death crisis. What's going on? What the hell is going on? The veiled woman was frightened, but she couldn't find the source. However, the next moment, when the veiled woman walked to the window and subconsciously looked at the sky, her expression suddenly froze, and her eyes were full of disbelief. This is... In the veiled woman's eyes, an illusory and invisible sword intent seemed to come from outside the sky. It continued to grow, as if supporting the world and filling all her sight. Please go to vinegar #lu #air #1 #shue. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.